Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Welcome back to Fundamentalist Fails, where we're looking at the fundamentalists, the lies they tell, the misinformation they give. I was just over, I do apologize for starting slightly late. I was over at a fundamentalist place arguing about transgender rights and have someone give me papers that were absolutely terrible. So I will get a copy of that and I'll probably upload it. Yeah, so I hope you're well. I'm well. I'm having a great day. It's Friday, which means it's Fundamentalist Fails. And it's going to be great. Yeah, I hope you're doing well. Who's around? Who's up? So this one sort of came at me. And before I start, and I do apologize. I was sort of lured into a room and then sort of, had to compose myself on the way over. It seems like the only way some people can ever win an argument is to have a mute button and sort of exercise power kind of thing, which is kind of sad. But, that's the way it is. When people got to lie, they got to loot. They got to mute, huh? So, yeah. I think that this one is coming on the tail of a very bad week for everybody, and I get it's a very bad week for everybody. I get that. Even though it's not my country, and I'm going to address the elephant in the room. Yes, I'm going to address the elephant in the room. That elephant being, a big orange elephant that just got into power for some crazy reason I don't understand. So let's address that. I'm baffled, quite frankly. I'm probably not as upset as some of my friends out there, but I'm certainly upset. I don't know what America is thinking. I don't know why they believe the lies and misinformation going around. I don't understand it at all. I don't understand it at all. It's so strange that from the chaos of last time, I don't understand why America wants that chaos again, why they want to have that, protesters gassed and people put in cages and people sort of, having all of these things happen to them. The sheer chaos of the last round, I don't understand it at all. I really don't. But seeing this video kind of gave me maybe some, maybe gave me some insight, some real insight to, what these people are thinking and what they're trying on. This is a couple of sort of, just give me 1 second. I do apologize. So thank you so much. Sorry. So this one gave me some insight as to what was going on and why, what currently the Christian right wing are doing to get people who ordinarily would do the right thing to basically do the wrong thing, to basically cause them to, because one of my things I was thinking was why would even, why would the normal Christians who just basically look after their church and walk their dog and don't do any of this fundamentalist stuff, why would they vote basically for Project 2025? Why would they do that? Why would they vote for autocracy and theocracy? Why would they do that? And I think sort of the real fundamentalists are kind of, you'll see in the video, they're kind of getting them into, well, you can't be a Christian without doing these things. Now, I think a lot of them know that it's wrong. I think a lot of them know that it's very wrong, but there's something that they're doing to overcome those objections. And that is they're attacking their empathy directly. They're basically saying, hey, you can't have empathy and be a Christian. You can't have sort of love for these people. And they're really making it about, if you have empathy and you're a Christian, if you're not following the letter of the Bible, then it doesn't matter how much empathy you've got for others, you're not a real Christian. That's essentially what they're doing. Um, So give me 1 second and I'll get this lined up. I do apologize. I'm just, yeah, as I said, I went to a room, started arguing trans issues with somebody that really gave me, he said he had papers showing this, showing that, and gave me nothing, gave me absolutely nothing, gave me news articles, gave me things that disagreed with him, usual Christian stuff. Yes, yes. But, and the thing is that the lies and misinformation, at one point he was saying, hey, psychiatrists are fake. Yep. And like he at one point said, those fake psychiatrists over at the American Pediatric Association. Yeah, because that isn't a reputable organization at all. That's just a bunch of jokers kind of thing. It's incredibly bad, incredibly bad. So I'm a bit flustered after all of that. And I really want to get on with the show and start picking this apart, because the lies and misinformation that people are presenting is just incredible. It's just incredible. Give me 1 second, and I'm just going to present this. Okay, well, let's get started. I hope you guys are doing well, but I'm really baffled. No, he wasn't a Scientologist, Christian, I believe, or Christian adjacent, maybe. I'm not 100% sure on that. I hope you do like my new setup and my new screen and stuff. It is a new experience for me. I'm trying to make myself much more, cooler and stuff like that. Yeah. Thank you, X Music, and good to see you, Left Hand Jedi. Good to see you, Reed. Ryaku, I don't understand why you back Trump. I'm more than happy to have a conversation about it, but I don't understand why anybody would. It's just so nonsensical to me. But this is, and I'll just find where I made some notes on this, and we will go through this, because I think this is really important. It's somebody called Elisa Childers, and she's interviewing somebody called Ali Beth Stuckey, who apparently is a very young, up-and-coming, right-wing conservative trad wife, basically. So one of the sort of trad wife movements, which I only learnt about through my wife, basically, how she said how ridiculous it was, these trad wives. They sort of go, well, the man should be the breadwinner, they should be the person in charge kind of thing, and then they go out and do their own thing, sans husband, and don't be a traditional wife. They're very much in a progressive line of work, which is social commentary, which is very, very strange. But I'm going to start this off. Hope you're all well. Ember, I was just arguing trans issues. Yeah, it is Nightmare Night. Yeah, I'm sorry about that, but hey.
Welcome to the Elisa Childers podcast, where we equip Christians to identify the core beliefs of historic Christianity, discern its counterfeits, and proclaim the gospel with clarity, kindness, and truth. And the Bible calls us as Christians to be salt and light in the world. We are to...
I get a lot of salt from Christians. I'm not sure about light, but a lot of salt, yes. Yeah.
Bring that saltiness, we're to bring that light into our culture to hopefully change culture and protect people. And we are living in a time where culture is a bit crazy. We have the redefinition of marriage. We have the redefinition of what male and female is. We have people advocating.
Yeah, so this is just the dog whistles that she goes through. We've got this. These are the issues. Now, the person I was just arguing on trans issues, they said it wasn't a Christian thing, and then sent me to a Christian website for their evidence. That's how bad they are. It's got nothing to do with Christianity. Oh, here's a Christian article saying trans is bad. Yeah, that's great. That's fantastic.
For radical abortion policies. These are Genesis 1 issues. These are creation ordinance issues. But our Christian witness isn't just kept to those issues, but we as Christians should be able to speak on everything from immigration policies to social justice. And that doesn't mean we can't have good faith discussions on what those different policies should look like, but the principles behind what's motivating so much of this, we as Christians, we have the authority of God's word, which we go to.
Yeah, so nobody's stopping them from speaking on things. No one's stopping them from doing that. That's the thing. They sort of want to say, oh, we're being silenced kind of thing, and no one's silencing them. But we've got objections when it comes to putting your religious beliefs on other people, and that's the problem. And the very next line makes it evident. She says, we have the authority. No, you don't. You just think you do. You don't have the authority to do anything. And that's the problem. They think they have a God-given authority, no matter what, to sort of tell people how to live and how to behave and how to, what marriage is and what gender is. And they don't. They absolutely don't.
To inform us of what to think about some of these things. And we have a guest today that has written a book called Toxic Empathy.
Yep. She wrote a book called Toxic Empathy. Right. So toxic empathy. I've heard of toxic masculinity, toxic femininity. I've heard of all kinds of toxic things. Toxic empathy. It's kind of ridiculous. Empathy isn't toxic. So the first question is, and this is probably a good place to start, is what exactly is empathy? What is empathy? What does it do? So empathy is a neurological system of social animals. It plays a critical role in sort of our social development. Empathy is when you get into the science of it, we have mirror neurons. The mirror neurons what they essentially do is, upon seeing emotion in other people, they will generate the same emotion in you. That's essentially what they will do. So the reason why it's so important is because it allows social animals, or social organisms in general, to be able to understand what another one is going through on a very fundamental level. It provides that connection to other organisms that you can say, hey, I understand what it feels like to be like that. And so it basically is a pro-social neurological condition that allows you to really work with another being, because you understand how it feels. And it's really weird for somebody to come out going, oh, well, empathy, that's not thing. But I'll just share this and just go through it. I might have to enlarge it. So it enables the sharings of emotions, needs, desires between individuals, providing an emotional bridge that promotes pro-social behavior. Yeah, that's a lot better explained than I have given. It requires an exquisite interplay of neural networks and enables us to perceive the emotions and rather resonate with them. And that's really important. Have you ever, somebody said something and it resonates with you? It really does trigger the same emotions in you. Like somebody would say, oh, I did this and, it all failed. And I feel so shattered because I tried my hardest and nothing came of it. And, that resonates with you. You feel that feeling that they're feeling. And it allows you to understand them way better than you could if they just described it and you just analyze it. Distinguish between it declines during medical training. Interesting. So yeah, and people that do not have empathy, for instance, you have there are some people without any sense of empathy at all, and they're called psychopaths or sociopaths, depending on whether they're born with it or whether they learnt it over time or conditioned into it. But the short thing is that without empathy, it gets very, very nasty. It will be very, very nasty.
How progressives exploit Christian compassion. It's Ali Bestecki. I'm a huge fan of Ali. I think she's one of...
So they're basically saying, hey, if they're saying, be compassionate, you're a Christian, don't be compassionate. And we'll see, do we want to take any bets on who we shouldn't be compassionate about? Do you want to take bets? Let's do a poll. Who do they say we shouldn't be compassionate of? Immigrants, trans people, gay people. The last one. Actually, I'll make that a bit more obvious. There's a poll for you. Feel free to vote. I know where mine's going. I know where mine's going.
Of the most courageous, biblically balanced voices out there. And she takes a lot of hits. There are a lot of false narratives about her out there, but I think she's doing a fabulous job. I loved this book. I endorsed this book. I said it's the book for this cultural moment. We're going to talk about some of those issues today. What is toxic empathy? What does it mean when we look at how people on the more progressive side of things, whether that be theologically, politically, ethically, culturally, how they are influencing more conservative Christians to be silent, to be really quiet?
Yeah, I'm sort of. Here's the thing. I'm getting from this video that they've had a run-in with some of the more progressive sort of priests and pastors and speakers in the Christian world out there, and they've basically been absolutely lambasted by them because of their stances, which are absolutely dreadful, by the way. So I think that this one's directed more towards the progressive Christians who won't, be bigots against trans people or be bigots against other people, basically.
About some of these topics and what the Bible has to say about what we should, how we should speak into these topics. I had some really big highlights from this episode. I asked Ali about being called a dangerous Christian nationalist. I asked her about being compared to a Nazi German soldier by Russell Moore in Christianity Today here recently. And I really wanted her to comment on those things because
yeah, so apparently the Ali Beth Stuckey was compared to a Nazi by a Christian guy in Christianity Today, which apparently is a huge publication. Of course, I had no idea because I'm not a Christian, but they seem very upset about it, kind of thing. And you'll find out why. It kind of, you really do start to understand why the more progressive Christians are calling them absolutely reprehensible.
I think that when you are bold for Christ in this culture, people are going to call you names. They're going to say things about you. And what they're saying about her today.
Yeah, it's not because you're bold for Christ. It's because you're saying things that are absolutely horrendous. That's the difference. Like, it's kind of this mentality that the Christians have. They just go, well, if I'm being hassled and being called a bigot, then I'm doing the right thing. And it's like, no, I'm just doing what Christ said I should do, or you're just being really nasty piece of work. One of the two. And I don't think it's, anything to do with Christ. I think you're just being an asshole.
Today, what they might be saying about me today is what they're going to be saying about you tomorrow if you're bold and you really speak up. So I hope that this episode encourages you. I hope it equips you to have a language to address some of these topics and be able to parse them in their proper categories. We talked about the role of pietism and how that kind of came to be in America and really caused a lot of Christians to think that the God-given institution of government is really something that's secular. That's not something we should really be speaking into. Whereas we know biblically God gave us government and there's a certain way he wants things to go and how we can think about those things as Christians. So I hope you get a lot out of this episode. I loved it. I love getting to talk with Ali Beth. And here it is. Well, Ali, welcome back to the podcast. So glad to have you back on, not only because you're just such a clear and good voice in the world right now, but because you've just written this amazing book called Toxic Empathy.
Toxic empathy isn't a thing. There's just empathy. Now, sometimes, we have empathy and we don't alter our actions based upon it. But having that empathy is never a bad thing. Like, that's the thing. They're trying to say, hey, having this empathy for these other people is bad. It's toxic. How is it toxic exactly? It's so weird. It's so strange. And it's so, like, that idea that empathy itself is bad is toxic in and of itself. Like, so this is just, and of course she's a right-wing commentator, influencer. She isn't any kind of psychological expert. She isn't any kind of, expert on empathy or neuroscience or anything like it. She's just a Christian with a website that wants to then declare all of these things, which is really, really bad. And of course, buy her DVDs because of course she's shilling something. Of course she is.
How Progressives Exploit Christian Compassion. This book I endorsed and I called it the book for this cultural moment. And I really meant that because the topics that you're addressing in this book are so eye-opening because I think of course, I knew that these topics were surrounding our theological discussions as Christians, but you've really pinpointed this idea of toxic empathy. Talk about that, and then we'll dig down into some of these particular issues. But the whole idea of how progressives exploit Christian compassion, how did you come up with that?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, first of all, for your endorsement. It meant a
Yeah, she pulled it out of her ass. Yeah, she literally pulled it out of her ass. Yeah, she basically doesn't like the way that we go to Christians and say, hey, don't you actually feel for these poor people that you're putting through all of this? And went, hey, I don't like that. It's toxic. That's where she got it from.
a lot to me. I started thinking about this concept, I guess, in the summer of 2020. There was a convergence of a lot of things happening. Everyone remembers it was the wake of George Floyd, it was COVID, it was an election year, a very contentious election year. And I was surprised hearing a lot of fellow evangelicals, even those that are considered conservative evangelicals, really kind of mimic the mottos of the world when it came to so-called racial and social justice. So there was the black square, but then there was also things like riots are the voice of the unheard, or we need to renounce our white privilege, and repeating words like systemic racism that I had really never heard before. And
So there's nothing that says white privilege like systemic racism. I've never heard these words before. What? I don't know how you can, like, to live your life. I'm not sure how old she is, at least 20s to your 20s, and never even hear about systemic racism is, she's 32. She's 32 and she'd never heard. Like, so what, that was, she was born in 1992. So at the time that was, it was probably, she was like 28 or so, 27, 28. To get to 27, 28 and never hear of systemic racism, what is wrong with you? Or white privilege is just incredible. Like it's kind of like, I've never heard of systemic racism. Yeah, I bet fish have never heard of water either. When it completely surrounds them, they don't know about it either. It's so wild someone can make it to that age with never hearing of it. Either that or she just has heard of it and doesn't believe it. I don't know, but wow.
And I started examining, okay, where are these claims coming from? Are they factually true? Are the policy prescriptions, like defunding the police, are they good? And most importantly, are they biblical? Like this message that we are hearing preached, it seems to be one God.
Are they biblical? It's just, what if you don't believe in the Bible? Like, this is the thing. Like, why? What? So if the murder of George Floyd is biblical, that's fine. Like, this is where we're getting to, that, hey, murdering people is fine as long as it's biblical. And I hate to point it out, but genocide does exist in the Bible. I can point to the Amalekites. I can point to the Midianites. These people were killed and wiped out, their lands taken by the Israelites. You could make a case. You could make a case that genocide is biblical, especially as God flooded the world and wiped everybody out. You can make a case of it, and it all comes down to interpretation.
Gospel to white people, another gospel to black people, a lot of partiality. And when I started kind of challenging this and just asking questions in private and in public to Christians that I still admire, but really admired then, I kept on hearing this word over and over again. And it was empathy. And I was actually told on multiple.
It's like she doesn't even understand what empathy is. Like, is she actually a psychopath or a sociopath? Because she doesn't seem to understand. I kept hearing this word, empathy. I don't know what it is. Never felt it before. But there it is, empathy. Are you serious?
Occasions that sometimes the truth or the facts really don't matter, when what's most important is that we are led by empathy and that we lead with empathy. I heard a lot of, we should vote with empathy. And I was thinking, like, if empathy is leading people to say or affirm things that aren't true, that could then lead to policies that are ultimately harmful, like soft on crime policies, lawlessness, defunding the police, then maybe empathy isn't a good guide. So where did this idea come?
Empathy isn't a good guide. Empathy, like soft on crime policies, empathy is not a good guide. You can still be hard on crime and have empathy for those people. Like, empathy can say, hey, I can understand where you're coming from, so let's be hard on the people that won't reform and have empathy for the people that do want to reform. You can still do that. Like, but the case that I want to make is, well, what actually gets you to what you're trying to achieve? You know, will you know, hard on crime efforts ever work? Right? Because we had the war on drugs, didn't work. The war on meth didn't work. The war on crime, guess what? It didn't work. It doesn't work. So, you know, it's kind of this, well, if you have empathy, you can say, hey, what do those people actually want? How can we actually stop them from committing crimes? And doing that is understanding how they feel and where they're coming from. Oof.
Come from, and what does it look like? And I realized that it wasn't just on this subject of social justice, which is a hard topic. I'm not acting like it is simple, but I noticed that the same simple formula was used when it came to social justice as with all these other topics like abortion, like gender, like sexuality and immigration. And it was basically, we can get into it in more detail, but capitalizing on our natural compassion or our call as Christians to be loving by evoking sympathy or empathy for a particular victim, and then using that empathy to manipulate us into affirming what that victim wants.
It's like she's got no idea. Like, how dare you point out that that person is a victim of policy that has been oppressed within society, or you know, made into a part of society that's picked on? How dare you point that out to me instead of living, you know, letting me live in ignorance and ignoring their plight entirely? I don't know what is wrong with this woman. I really don't. It's like saying, you know, you're taking advantage of my empathy by pointing out that person that's collapsed and been beaten in the street. So then I've got to do something about that victim. And I don't want to. So how dare you point them out to me? How dare you? How dare you point out the person that's a victim? It's incredible.
Or the policy prescription that the media tells us will help that victim. And so, like I said, I saw that in every subject, and that's why I wanted to write the book.
Well, you were asking questions nobody was supposed to be asking, but yet we were all thinking inside. So I remember.
Look, we're not saying all policy is going to be successful, but we're saying that, hey, let's not do the policy that actively harms them. You know, like, let's have some compassion for these people. And you're going, no, well, you're just taking advantage of my compassion for me to be nice, like, and forcing me to be nice to them. What?
And you opened your book this way talking about that black square, because I remember, I mean, tensions were so high. Nobody wants to be racist. We want to solve racism, right? Racism, the sin of racism, we want to get rid of that. And then these black squares started showing up on Instagram. And I remember thinking, like, nothing about this feels right. But yet they're presenting this as the only empathetic response. And so I remember I just didn't post it. I just thought, you know what, this will pass. Well, it didn't pass. And of course, those narratives get formed into other things. And I'd love for you to talk about something, because it's related to this issue. You and I were at the Prestonwood Biblical Worldview Conference the week before the Share the Arrows event, which was, congratulations, by the way. That was such an amazing, I still meet people at different conferences who came from.
I think that was the one that Trump was at. It was a very right-wing evangelical crowd, and I think we're in trouble from the right-wing evangelical crowd. I think they're going to really start to implement their Project 2025. I think that is coming. I mean, Trump, the telling thing about him, and again, to go back into the orange elephant in the room, the problem with him is he said he hadn't heard of Project 2025, which is not the same as saying I won't implement it. It's not the same thing. And I think there's a very good reason why he never said, well, I'm not going to implement any of that policy. I think the plan is to implement that policy. So whether that will get through or not, I hope not. But, you know, we have to oppose that in your state, in your sort of country, wherever.
somewhere across the country
I
and
love
flew
that.
there. I know, I love it too. And they
I
made a
love that.
girls' weekend of it. But it was
Yes.
so fun and it was so good. But you said something the week before on a panel discussion that we were on together. And the question was, what are you most concerned about in the church today? And then what are you most encouraged by? You said something for what you're most concerned about that I thought was so profound. I've not stopped thinking about it since. I have quoted you, and I've probably not quoted you correctly because I was doing my best to remember what you said. But I would love for you to unpack that a little bit more. You said what you're
Can
so
you
concerned
remind me?
about. I'm
Okay.
going to remind you. Yeah. It was the compartmentalization that Christians
Mm.
do. So, like, we compartmentalize our ethics from our politics, from our theology, from maybe how we think about culture. And I just, that to me, you articulated something that I've been thinking a lot about, but had never really put into words. And I think it's really powerful. So talk about why that's such a concern for you right now.
Yes, I think that we have, as Christians, we kind of have a poor understanding of what it even means to have a worldview. That word is obviously all encompassing. How do you view the world? Of course, that includes culture, that includes politics.
Nobody is saying that Christians can't have their worldview. No one's saying that. The problem is that your worldview entails that you have ultimate authority over everybody because of your religious beliefs, and that is not the case. We're not doing sort of the things that we're doing, like immigration policy and sort of the policy on medical care because of my religious belief. We're doing it because it's the best for people. I don't, I get that your worldview says that you're the most important thing in it. I know it says that. I'm just here to tell you you're wrong. Like, you're not the most important thing in the world. You're not this special thing that's been chosen by a higher power to carry out some kind of master plan. Like, I know you think that. It's just you're not.
Politics, that includes parenting, that includes interpersonal relationships. That doesn't mean that all of those things are on the same level or that the Bible has clear-cut answers on all the intricacies of all of those categories, but biblical principles should inform how we think of all of these things. And really, it's only Christian conservatives who have been told, and in many cases have imbibed this idea that our faith has to be compartmentalized over here, and then we vote with a completely different worldview.
Nobody's stopping you from voting however you want. Obviously, no one's stopping you from voting however you want. You can. But I think that at a certain point, you're going to really come up against the social contract, which basically says, and sort of, so a lot of the Christians, they don't understand what the social contract is. The social contract basically says that the populace, the masses, the people of the country under the authority of the government will do what the government tells them, as long as the government provides certain rights that they don't violate. That's important because they're basically talking about violating the rights under that social contract. So if they do violate those rights, you nullify the social contract. You're basically, if a cop beats somebody, they violate their bodily integrity as the government, that's still against the law. But they want to violate that contract. They want to tell people how to live and what to do. And it is dangerous because you'll either have people leave that don't want their rights, but they will go to a country where their rights aren't violated. That's number one. Number two, they won't stand for it. And that's dangerous, incredibly dangerous.
With a completely different belief system. And we're not allowed to bring what we believe about right and wrong, male and female, into the classroom, into the school board meeting.
Correct. It's because of the separation of church and state, which is another one of those rights. Because I don't believe in Christianity, I shouldn't have Christianity taught to my kids. It should be neutral. The people that should be deciding what goes into the classroom is education department. And pretending that gay people don't exist, pretending that trans people don't exist. Now, I would agree with you if someone was pushing kids towards being trans. I don't think that's right. But telling them that these people exist and how to work with them within society, that is not a bad idea because they're going to meet them eventually. And the the trans people and the gay people and the other people have just as much right to be part of society as you do. They have the same right to be part of society and be free within society. You just don't want them to be there. And that's a problem because they're there. Sometimes they're the pastor of your own damn church. They're there. And you're basically saying, well, we don't want them to be there. Tough, they're there. Like, seriously, if I said, well, I don't like Christians, I don't think Christians should be part of society. You know, we shouldn't teach people that Christians exist in schools. What? I don't. It's so weird. It's so strange. It's kind of like, well, I object to this part of society. You don't get to determine who's part of society. You don't get to choose that. Obviously, you're going to try.
Into our workplace and into the voting booth. And we've been told that when Christian conservatives do that, it's Christian nationalism, it's the Handmaid's Tale, it's theocratic fascism, Christofascism, all of these crazy words. But
yeah, when you're violating people's rights to do it, yes. Yes. So again, social contract. When you have a right to bodily autonomy, when you have a right to bodily integrity, when you have a right to freedom of religion, freedom of speech, we have all of these rights that are inherent under the social contract. That says that, hey, they can impose laws that I don't litter. They can impose laws that tell me that I've got to do X, Y, and Z. I've got to obey police officers that tell me to do something. I've got to, you know, that give lawful orders. I've got to do all of these things. But in exchange for that, the government doesn't take away my freedom to be whatever religion I want, or my freedom to have my bodily integrity and my bodily autonomy respected. They don't take away my right to be able to protest, for instance, and oppose ideas within society. This is part of the social contract. And you're talking about taking away and breaking the social contract because you think that your imaginary friend is superior to the social contract that has been formed between the people and the government. It is insanity.
But of course, when Kamala Harris goes to a Souls to the Polls event, she gives an entire sermon that basically likens herself to a coming prophet or even a Messiah-like figure.
No, Kamala Harris has never gone to an event and likened herself to a prophet or a coming Messiah. Like, this is just pure projection on this lady's part. She's never done that. When has she done that? Like, seriously, I don't know. Where do they get this stuff from? She's confident. She's a ex-prosecutor. She used to be a prosecutor. She's currently a politician. She's currently the vice president. As far as I know, that's the way she's acted. I see no evidence that she's acted like some sort of religious prophet. Yeah, absolutely. No, you're right, left-handed Jedi. Yeah, absolutely. Trump called himself the chosen one. Yeah, and he said that God made him win for a reason. Yeah. He's all aboard the prophet train kind of thing.
It's going to save Black America. It's going to save basically Western civilization. You don't.
Yeah, she never said that either. No, she never said that. She never said she was going to save Black America or Western civilization. Trump did. Trump said that we would have World War III and the war would end if he wasn't voted in. Trump said that, not Kamala.
Don't hear writers at The Atlantic saying, oop, this is scary Christian nationalism. This is Christofascism. We need to worry about that. And so even the so-called progressive Christian understands that what they believe has to inform every choice they make. They're going...
You can do that. You can do that. Right up until you are taking away people's rights or violating people's rights in doing that. You can do that. You can make your choices, vote how you want to vote, be free to pray, to say whatever you want. You have that right up until you come up against somebody else's rights. And if you're taking away their rights because you want to, because you think you're more important, that's going to be the problem. So it's not the fact that you're not allowed to say all this stuff and it's Christofascism. What we're saying is that you implementing a system of government that devalues anybody that is not a white Christian nationalist is Christo-fascism. That's what it is. And it usually starts with the scapegoating of certain individual groups who you make the primary cause of all the ills of society. This is how it started in Germany. You get a few groups like Jews, homosexuals, communists, and you make them the cause of all of the ills of society. They're the cause. It's the only difference now is that the groups are illegal immigrants, trans, and gay people. That's the groups now. It's just it's fascism with a different name.
Progressive goes into every space and says, how can I conform this space to my beliefs? Yeah. How can I change what this school thinks about gender to conform what I believe about gender? How can I change the policy?
Well, no, it's what the experts say about gender. It's what the doctors say about gender. It's what the American Psychiatry Association says about gender. It doesn't just say, well, I'm going to change it to what I personally believe. That's not what I'm doing. I'm going and reading things from people who are actual doctors, not some random Christian website, and not just cherry picking papers so it supports what I say.
At my workplace to conform to what I think about gender, what I think about race, whatever it is. The Christian conservative, though, we have been successfully shut up into believing that it is neutral and democratic of us to leave our worldview at home. And I am not
no one's expecting you to leave your worldview at home. But this is the thing, you've got to understand that, and this is where we're talking about empathy. You wouldn't like it if someone made you a second-class citizen in your own country and took away your rights. And this is where empathy comes in. She cannot understand why people are angry you're trying to take away their rights. She can't understand because she has no sense of empathy. She doesn't understand that. I mean, I can understand it. I would feel horrible if someone took away my rights. If I didn't have the right to say who I was, if I didn't have the right to, love whoever I wanted to love, if I didn't have the right to marry whoever I wanted to marry, if I didn't have the right to be to my own personal bodily autonomy and someone couldn't just use my body without my permission, I would be upset. So she literally does not have any empathy. She does not understand why people would be opposed to that. She has no sense of empathy. That and I'm kind of leaning that way, Generation Y. I mean, I kind of am. It does seem sort of, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a psychologist. I can't diagnose people, but it does seem, like a psychopath when you cannot understand why people wouldn't want their rights taken away.
Theocrat. Like, I believe in America, I say, let the best idea win, but don't leave your ideas at home, Christian. Like, if God is the God of the universe, if he is the authority over all things, and if he is love, and if he is good, all of the things that every Christian would affirm, then we have to believe that his ways are better. They're better for our neighbor.
They're better for our neighbor who doesn't believe in a God. So this is the problem. You're basically going, well, I believe in this religion, and my God says to take your rights away from you because it's better for you. And you may not believe it, but you just wait till you die. You'll find out that it's better for you. Like, we can actually analyze whether actions are good or bad for the society, whether it's good or bad for the individual. And you're just basically saying, well, I believe in the God, so I'm going to do stuff that's bad for you, but you're wrong that it's bad for you because, wait, you'll get into heaven and that's good. It's not an argument. It's basically saying my imaginary friend will make it up to you in the next life. No, you don't get to do that.
Better for the immigrant. They're better for every person in every realm of society. And we have every right, and I even argue the responsibility, to bring the fullness of our biblical worldview into every sphere that we occupy.
And it's such a brilliant way of shutting Christians up if you really think about it. It's like the particular type of name calling. For example, you have been called a dangerous Christian nationalist. You have been...
Yeah, I understand why.
Compared to a Nazi. And I think it's stunning to me.
And I can understand why that one as well. I don't know if she truly understands fascism. I mean, she doesn't even understand empathy. I think fascism is a bit beyond her. But the sort of the Christo-nationalism that she's promoting is kind of Nazi-like. It really is. This whole idea of divine purpose is very, very Nazi-like. The Nazis were very big on divine blood, pure blood, and divine purpose. They were chosen to be in the position of power that they were in. And that's a big thing.
Because when I engage with your content, which I do quite often, to me, you are one of the most balanced, even gentle voices that are promoting the biblical. It blows my mind when this kind of stuff happens. But I wanted to make that point because I think that the task of discerning the times is getting more and more difficult, because it's one thing, you know, when I came out with Another Gospel and I was talking about progressive Christianity, pretty much the evangelical church was just fine with naming people like Rob Bell and Brian McLaren and maybe Nadia Bolz-Weber, because they're so out there. They're saying things that are so radically different. But today, the task of discerning that progressive influx is so much more difficult. And I think you're doing a brilliant job at that, despite the names that you're being called, which are so ridiculous. But who, like in the evangelical church, who are you concerned about? If you feel comfortable maybe saying some names of people that you're like, okay, that person is very obviously kind of sliding into progressive.
So many. There's a lot of people in what I call the mushy middle, and then some people who have just kind of basically.
Yeah, I cut out a lot of irrelevant parts also to keep it a bit shorter. A lot of it of them talking about how they don't like the progressive Christian people kind of thing. So yeah.
Declared themselves on the left. I would say even until a few years ago, conservative Baptist churches were inviting Russell Moore into their congregations to preach. And you mentioned that I'm being likened to a Nazi. Well, that was Russell Moore in the pages of Christianity.
Yeah, you're unhinged, lady. You're really unhinged. Your ideas about how Christians should be taking control of the government is quite frankly horrifying. And she will expound on that a bit more, why they should be taking control of the government. The whole system is based upon, hey, nobody forces their religion on other people. We do it based upon what's good for the people, what is beneficial for the people. You know, we can tell, like, you know, if you give somebody a certain drug, there'll be side effects, but all in all, it will be better. And we base that upon scientific reasoning, which gives us the most accurate results of whether something is good or something is bad. The problem is that we have specialists and people that have studied and studied and studied all their lives, studying the effects of these things on on people. And you come along with your Bible and a dream, and basically cherry pick articles and try to say, hey, this is bad for everybody, based upon nothing more than your religious conviction. And I see it all the time. I just came from a room where it was happening. It happens all the time.
Today in a very passive aggressive way, because he didn't like how I interpreted a verse in Matthew 25. I said a very mainstream view that when Jesus is saying the least of these, he's actually talking about persecuted Christians. Now, Christians are called to care for the poor elsewhere, but in that particular passage, he is talking about how we treat his people is basically how we treat him. And Russell Moore said that that's basically an interpretation that a 20th century German soldier would have, which is an absolutely, like, it's so absurd, it's hard to even engage with it. But that's someone who's coming out and saying basically that he is progressive.
Yeah. So this is sort of a point of theology between the two people. So I did grab the passage that they were arguing about. And I'm just going to go through it very, very quickly. I won't, this isn't a Bible study, but I'm just going to go through it very, very quickly. Basically, what they are sort of arguing about. I think it was the. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's Matthew 25. Okay. So what she's talking about is this Matthew 25, the parable of the 10 virgins. Nice, hey? So basically, a master of the servants, he went out, they came back, but basically it's down to what somebody brought back, right? But he said, come to the blessed of the Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger and you invited me in. I needed clothes and you clothed me. I was sick and you looked after me. I was in prison to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? They're basically saying, hey, we never saw you, to God, basically, or the son, you know, the Lord, basically, the king. So this is sort of Jesus saying, hey, you took care of me. And they said, hey, we didn't take care of you. And then they said, what? Sorry, my bad. What happened to my picture? Things have gone horribly, horribly awry. Horribly, horribly awry. No, that's not what I was after. Forward? There we go. Okay. Oh, for fuck's sake. I wish that pop-up would stop appearing. The king will cry, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. So basically, the interpretation, the mainstream interpretation, is basically all the people are basically however you treat any people kind of thing is how you treat Jesus, basically. So Jesus will say, hey, you treated me good because you treated all of humanity good, or you treated me bad. The interpretation she takes, right, is that the people that he is talking about are just Christians, right? So it's weird that it says a stranger, because a stranger isn't necessarily a Christian, but she interpreted it as, well, we get to be absolutely horrific to people that aren't Christians. Right. And then he'll say to the people in the rest, depart from me, you are cursed into the eternal fire. For I was hungry and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger and you did not invite me in. I need clothes and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison and you did not look after me. They will also answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or stranger or clothed or sick in prison? Truly, I tell you, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Basically, what she's interpreting that as is, that doesn't mean everybody. That means just Christians, right? So the bone of contention is the guy that called her a Nazi is saying, hey, that's something a German soldier in World War II might say, that, hey, it's okay that I do this to the Jews because that only applies to Christians, right? Which was sort of kind of one of the things that they said to excuse that passage. So he's not wrong, but her interpretation is definitely one that the more right-wing conservative Christians do. They absolutely do that interpretation because they can't read that and go, well, you've got to treat people in general nice, because they don't want to treat people in general nice. You know, they don't want to do that.
Progressive. And I would have said just politically, but now I'm wondering if he is progressive theologically completely as well. And so I'd say anyone in that camp, anyone who is in that after party curriculum. I also caution against an organization like the AND campaign, which coincidentally is run by all registered Democrats. And that's not to say that Christians can't have in good faith discussions about politics, because not every policy or political discussion comes down to the created order, but enough do at this point for us to say the two sides aren't the same. There's a lot of daylight between the two sides. So really any pastor who gets up there and their election sermon is saying, well, both sides are bad and politics can't save us. Okay, that might be one part of the sermon. That can't be the point, because we are looking, all Christians, myself included, for moral clarity. It's a very chaotic time. Yeah. It's a confusing time. I think some pastors think that their moral relativism about politics is bold and courageous, and it's really not.
You know what? Nobody on the secular side thinks that they're sort of, you know, they're leaning towards progressivism is bold or courageous, right? We more think, hey, though that church has to change with the times or they're quickly going to become irrelevant, because people don't want to see other people harmed. So this is the problem that these right-wing evangelicals have. They kind of, they're kind of saying, hey, we should go back to fundamentalist, fire and brimstone, only treat Christians with any kind of respect, and, you know, Spanish Inquisition, everybody else. They're kind of saying, let's return to the good old days. The problem is that people don't want to actually see that. But then she comes along and says, okay, well, here's a way you can trick yourself into not having empathy for other people. It's absolutely psychotic. It really is.
Like, you don't have to endorse a candidate. You don't even have to say, hey, you got to vote Republican. But let's go through the issues that are talked about in Genesis 1. Let's go through what Genesis 1:27 says about the value of life from the moment of the creation of humanity on. Let's go through what the Bible says about gender. Let's go through what the Bible says about marriage. When those things are messed up further, when they're institutionalized and enshrined as a right in the United States, disorder and chaos ensue.
No, disorder and chaos does not ensue. That's the thing. It's like sort of saying, hey, when slavery is enshrined as a right in the US, and when you try to, give people rights that are slaves, it just chaos ensues. Yeah, only because you're causing it. You're the ones causing it. Right? Like, you're the ones making the problems. This isn't a case of, oh, well, if we just got to do what we did, there would be no problems whatsoever. None for you. There would be problems for the people that you're oppressing. But you don't care about them. They literally don't care about the people being oppressed. They only like, well, you're causing chaos. It's unfair on me that I have to put up with this. People wanting rights and people wanting to be free.
Which party seems to be most endorsing institutionalizing disorder and death and destruction of the family and chaos? There is one party that is...
Yeah, GOP, because that is essentially Trump's time in office was so chaotic. It was madness. It was people trying to stamp out fires all over the place. And then his response to all of the crises he had, whether it be hurricanes or whether it be viral infections, whether anything, financial issues, whether it be wars, it was always absolutely chaotic. Absolutely chaotic. Remember, he drone struck a wedding and killed one of the Iranian generals that were actually fighting ISIS. Like, it was madness. He struck down the Iran nuclear deal, causing us to, Iran to be able to, that they're no longer in agreement not to create nuclear weapons. It was madness. So yeah, the GOP is the one you're talking about, honey. I'm not sure if you understand that, but that is the party of chaos at the moment. It's so much the party in chaos that most of the Republicans have left the party.
More closely aligned with that chaos. It is true that both parties are imperfect and neither party is salvific. That is absolutely true. But I heard a pastor say this, which party is going to best stem the tide of evil?
Yeah.
I want pastors that are going to go up there and be clear about that. The pastors that are wishy-washy about that just can't say it. I just think I want to give grace and give the benefit of the doubt, but gosh, people want clarity, and if you can't give them that, they're going to get it elsewhere. And that seems to me a high responsibility of a shepherd to give his sheep clarity. So
yeah, I just love how they just love being sheep. They just compare themselves to sheep. They have flocks. We're all sheep. We should just follow the pastor and not think. We're just sheep. It's like, and then they call us sheep. It's so weird. Why would you be proud of being sheep that you're just led around? I have no idea. Like, why can't you people think for yourselves? It's wild to me.
Anyone who is unwilling to do that, I think, probably needs to be veered away from.
Yeah, I agree with you on Russell Moore. I think he's the one to watch right now as far as sliding into progressivism, which you're not supposed to say his name. That's the thing about this whole thing that kind of bothers me is in the name of empathy, there are people that are sort of untouchable, the evangelical royalty. And look, I'm not saying he's not a Christian. I'm not saying any of that. It's just in my experience of watching church after church, organization after organization slide off of the progressive Christian hill. I've seen it happen many, many, many times.
Yeah, so they're basically upset that people aren't being complete fundamentalist evangelical douchebags, essentially. They're just unhappy about that. And it's sort of, it's really, really weird that they're even the evangelicals think these two are horrible, because they are. They're absolutely awful.
This is my assumption, because in the tweet, my original post said, because I hear Democrats say a lot, and you've pointed this out, that progressive Christians allow their politics to drive their theology, not the other way around. And so I hear a lot the justification of Christians who vote Democrat by saying, I'm voting for the least of these. I'm voting for the marginalized. And I said, look, I'm actually voting for the least of these, because the least of these is Jack Phillips. The least of these is the persecuted Christian who, for the sake of biblical values, has been absolutely harassed.
So yeah, you just heard that right. The least of these, the people worst off in society, is what she's saying, are the poor Christians who have been harassed because they want to take people's rights away. So she's basically saying she's worse off. You know, we have homeless people, we have vets with mental health issues, we have, you know, trans people who are incredibly marginalized, we have gay people we have all of these really vulnerable groups, and we can tell by scientific studies who's vulnerable because they have the least health outcomes and the least life outcomes by studying, you know, all of the problems associated with them. And she just said that the worst off in society are those poor Christians. Yeah, she just said that. Look, there's Christians that are incredibly vulnerable, but let's not pretend that you know, all Christians as a demographic are the demographic that's worse off. I'm not saying individual Christians can't be, you know, you go, hey, they're really having it rough, we need to help them. You know, there's plenty of Christians who are homeless and things, but the demographic we should be focusing on here is the homeless part, not the Christian part. Because there's some Christians that are doing incredibly well. You know, you can't sit there and go, well, Pat Robinson, that poor Christian man, who, you know, all he's got is his mansion and his jet and his cars and his, you know, all of this stuff. Come on now. Seriously? The Christians are the worst off in society. What, because people don't like your bigotry and ignorance? Oh no. My heart bleeds. Seriously, I know that she doesn't understand empathy, because holy crap, how she thinks somebody can be empathic. And it doesn't surprise me she hadn't heard of white privilege until like she was, you know, in her 30s, because wow.
And a victim of lawfare by progressive activists for the past 12 years. So when I'm actually looking to vote on behalf,
yeah, that lawfare, as you call it, is simply standing up for the rights of other people. It's sort of like, well, they aren't letting us oppress and treat people badly. I'm being oppressed.
off of the least of these persecuted Christians, I want to vote for the party that best upholds their liberty. That's not going to put pro-lifers in prison the way the Harris and Biden administration is, but it's going to pardon those people. That's like Romans 13.
Didn't she just say soft on crime? Like, she's just like, unlike the Biden and Harris administration, which want to put people in prison, I want to pardon them. Didn't you just say they had soft on crime policy? So let me get this straight. Their soft on crime policies is putting people in prison, whereas yours is pardoning them. How does that work exactly? Is that soft on crime? I don't. What the hell?
Governments are instituted by God to reward good and punish evil. I see the Harris-Biden administration.
No, governments are not instituted by God to reward good and punish evil. No, they are not. The government's power is a mandate from the masses. They are the people giving power to that government. That is all. You are fundamentally misunderstand what governments are. And the idea that your government is given by God is the problem. Because you don't want to use that government to do God's will. You want to use it to do your will. I mean, I'm sure that the people she wants to pardon are Christians. You know, she wants to be tough on crime, i.e., everybody that's not Christians, but she wants to pardon the Christians.
Doing the opposite. So that's basically what my tweet is about. And I think what made Russell Moore mad, because Russell Moore's not dumb. He's very smart. He's an
smarter than you, apparently.
Excellent writer. He knows the Bible. I know he knows the Bible. He was not unaware that Calvin and Augustine and De Young and Denny Burke and Christianity Today argued the same thing that I did about what the least of these meant. What I think he was mad at, and what he didn't include in his article because it would have given it away, is that I undermined the progressive dogma that he and many others use to justify voting Democrat. Because when you take away what really is the only pseudo-Christian argument to vote for the party of unfettered abortion, well, then you've got nothing. Because you hear that a lot from, well, yeah, sure, Republicans kind of get it right on abortion, but all of these other groups over here, Democrats get it right on those things. And
I can see that. I can see how Christians would say, hey, we like Republicans on their abortion stance. I personally disagree. I think it's an awful stance. But they say, hey, but the Democrats want to treat people with respect and kindness and don't want to put a fascist into government kind of thing. I totally understand that. But you're sort of what she's trying to do is say, well, you can't vote for Democrats and be a real Christian. Essentially, that's what she's doing. She's basically saying, hey, if you have empathy for all these people, but you're against this one issue, you've got to vote this one issue. You have to.
They use that least of these first to justify that. When you take that away, well, then his entire thing, his entire justification for being progressive crumbles. So I personally, if I were to assume...
So think about what she's saying. She's basically saying, hey, we should take away the idea in Christianity that we treat our fellow humans with kindness. That least of us passage, just apply it to the Christians. Don't apply it to anybody else. And I'm not surprised that there are a whole bunch of Christians that have a massive problem with that. The history of Christianity has been, you know, as much as I disagree with their worldview, it has been caring for the poor and the homeless and things like that. I disagree with their message. I hate it that they sort of, you know, hold food and sort of health hostage for prayer and affirmations. But, you know, that has been their tradition for a long, long while. And along she comes, she wants to say, hey, screw the poor. Why should I care about the poor? The least of us, and she said it herself, the least of us are Christians. We should be caring about them. Wow. I'm not surprised that your fellow Christians are lambasting you.
I think that that's really what he was upset by.
And I read the article that he wrote, and what was sort of concerning to me, on top of all the things we've already talked about, was the way in which he went about defending his interpretation. There was no appeal to the original language. There was no appeal to church history and how church fathers interpreted this verse. It was very rhetorical. It was very empathy driven. Like, that's the primary way you're going to interpret all these verses, is through this sort of lens of empathy. And
oh yeah, I'm sure that Jesus would hate you using empathy. Yeah, no, what I've read of Jesus, you know, the do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. That's not empathy. That's he meant do unto others as you want to do to them. That's what he meant, really. You know, like, that means nothing.
Well, we don't have to think of it that way because we can use it this way. That was ultimately, as far as I could tell, his reasoning. It's like, well, we can use it this way. And so that, to me, is very concerning. Even, like, you know, if people are getting uncomfortable right now because we're getting into the political sphere, which, again, we can't compartmentalize these things. We should be able, as Christians with a biblical worldview, to be able to comment on everything in culture. If there's anything that in culture comes around where you're not supposed to say it because you're Christian, that's a huge red flag.
No, you can. You absolutely can. And you can say it. But the problem is that you think you're special and that no one should be able to say, hey, that's a terrible idea because of, number one, the most vulnerable in our society are not Christians. They're the poor, they're the homeless, they're the you know, sort of people, single mothers, they're these communities. Black people are incredibly, you know, they have shorter life expectancy. Like, you don't want anyone to come back and say, hey, you're 100% wrong, and we're not doing that because we need to take care of these people. You see that as us manipulating you into having some empathy for your fellow human being. And that is shocking. That is shocking that you want to see that as manipulation. Hey, don't you care about these people that are starving and stuff? Oh, that's manipulation. I don't know what to say to that. So you do care about them, you just don't want to hear about them. Weird, so weird. And this whole idea that you've got this special place of privilege within our society that you get to decide what's right or wrong. No, you don't. No.
That's a huge red flag that we're being silenced for a reason that isn't a good one, because we should be able to, from a Christian worldview, comment on anything that we're asked about. And so that...
Who's being silent? Like they are literally on a program talking nonstop about all this stuff. No one's silenced. You're very loud. You're incredibly loud over in the US. You have such a voice over in the US. You are not marginalized. You are not silenced. You're still talking. But we also have the right to say, hey, these are dumb ideas and here's why. And you think that's being silenced. If you're being, like, if your ideas are bigotry, I'm going to call you a bigot because they're bigotry. You're a bigot. You're not being silenced. That's just responding to what you're saying.
What really concerned me was his actual tactic, because that's a very progressive theological tactic that you kind of see that those underpinnings unraveling there. Well, I am grateful for you and for the hits that you take. And I think it's important for people to hear that stuff, because if they are going to speak out and be a biblical Christian in this culture, they're going to be called some of those things and compared to some of those things as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny, you know, all you have to do to stop being called a Christo-fascist is kind of to stop being a Christo-fascist. Fascism is a very specific thing, and like what worries me is these people, they don't seem to know what it is, how it works. They don't seem to understand that putting a populist guy in there with a backing from evangelical Christians that will clamp down on certain marginalized groups in order to scapegoat them for all the ills of society is the fascist playbook. Like, it doesn't, it's so ridiculous that they will basically, it's sort of, you know, I don't even know what to say to them at that point. Like, don't you understand how this is fascism? Maybe not.
And so, you know, it's good to keep that in mind.
And it is important. And I try to remember too, because look, no one likes to be called those things. Like, no one likes to be told. I didn't like in 2020 when I was told that I didn't have empathy, or you're called a racist for not posting a black square.
You don't have empathy. I've noticed that. You don't have empathy. You don't seem to even understand what empathy is. Like, I don't, it's very, very strange. You don't understand what empathy actually is.
No one wants to be called those things. I don't want to act like I'm like, yeah, I don't care that Russell Moore likens me to a Nazi in the pages of Christianity Today. Like, I'm a mom of 3 just trying to navigate the craziness of this world. I don't want to be called that. I don't want to purposely create enemies. But for all of us, whether it's small, someone saying something rude about you, or whether it's major persecution that Christians around the world are dealing with, like, we have to remember Jesus's fate, not his ultimate fate and, you know, ascending to heaven, but his fate in crucifixion. We have to remember Stephen. Stephen was stoned to death for sharing the gospel. I think sometimes we think, well, if I just tell the truth, then they'll believe me because it's true, and they can't be mad about that. People get really mad at the truth, and he is described.
That's like, this is the thing. It's only the truth to you. To other people, they don't believe it's true. There's no reason to think that it's true. And just because you think it's true doesn't mean they're going to. And the problem isn't you sharing the word. The problem is you forcing your religion on people because you think it's true. Like, I don't, and this is where empathy would come in really handy, because you would understand if some person who was Islamic came up to you and started pushing Sharia law on you because he says that it's true, how you would get annoyed. But they've got no sense of empathy. Like, can you understand from that point of view, that would make you upset if a person who was Muslim pushed Sharia law on you? That's it. That's why. It's not some special divine reason that, you know, Jesus said that we were going to be persecuted. It's just you're annoying people because of what you're doing.
Described as being full of grace and truth. I would love to be described as full of grace. So he was full of grace. He shared the gospel, and they got so angry that he shared the gospel with them that they picked up stones and they stoned him to death. And I think that we live in a different age where we can somehow escape hate. And if we're nice enough, and if we're winsome enough, and if we kind of, you know, ride the fence enough, then everyone will like us. But everyone who desires to live a godly life in Christ Jesus will be persecuted to one degree or another. Jesus said, they will hate you because of me. And I don't want to conflate the gospel with politics, but anything that.
Yeah, I just, that's fine. I just, like, it's not that, it's not that, if you be winsome enough, or they'll leave you alone if you'll be nice enough, basically. That's not the case that we're talking about here. What we're saying is that modern society expects certain things of us in accordance with what's best for everybody. And your religious beliefs are going to take a back seat to that, whether you like it or not, because there's a lot of people with a lot of different religious beliefs that would like to implement them, but we don't on each other. We just say, hey, if you want to be part of this religion, you can, but we're not going to force religious beliefs on anybody. And that's the only way that our current civilization works. It's the only way. And along you come and you're basically saying, well, I want to force this on people. I want to force my beliefs down their throat and make them do what I want because I have the truth. Yeah, and the Muslim next to you says they have the truth. And the Buddhist next to you says they have the truth. And the Hindu next to you says they have the truth. We cannot do that.
It is in line with a biblical worldview that the Bible says is true. When you represent that and you get lambasted for it in one way or another, that is a form of persecution that we are promised. And so we can just take comfort in that is contributing for us a far greater glory. Yeah. So the first 3 chapters were, very easy to write, and that it's very black and white. Like, those are creation order issues when we go through abortion, when we go through gender, when we go through the definition of marriage. And then we get to 2 issues, immigration and social justice, that aren't necessarily created order issues, but I think the Bible does speak clearly on. Maybe not when we get into the nitty-gritty of policy, which I think that we can disagree in good faith, but the general principles of borders and parameters and walls and security, I do think that we see very clearly throughout Scripture. Yes, I do want to show.
Yeah, nobody's like saying that you shouldn't have borders, but walls aren't really effective because most of the illegal immigrants, they're not coming over the border, they're coming in legal ports of entry. It's not like, walls are kind of an archaic thing that because they're not really going to, like, they serve the defensive purpose, as in they would stop an invading army. But we have drones now, right? We have missiles like that will go over the wall. We have airplanes now. Walls aren't gonna really cut it anymore. Oh, thank you so much. I want to give a big shout out to In Time and Nick. Welcome. Thank you so much for the raid. Really appreciate it. This is absolutely crazy. And I got to email you at some point, Nick. I really do, mate.
People, the personal side, the human side of illegal immigration, that there are women, moms fleeing for a better life. But that's the only side that we ever hear. And that is when our empathy can draw us to supporting open borders or liberal immigration policy, because the only stories that we think of is the poor Colombian woman fleeing gang violence. But on the other side of it, we have Kate Steinle. Kate Steinle was a young woman when she was 32 years old. She was walking down a pier with her father in San Francisco one afternoon, and she was shot in the back. Her dad held her as she took her last breath, and she managed to utter, "Help me, Daddy." But she died right then because an illegal immigrant who had been deported 5 times but had been shielded from another deportation because of the sanctuary city policies that were championed by Kamala Harris and other progressive politicians, he shot her and he killed her.
Yeah, and we're not saying that person shouldn't be prosecuted and held accountable, but the problem is that you're putting everybody into the same sort of lump as that person. It would be like me saying, well, I don't like this Christian over here. All Christians are like that. There's been Christians that they've done incredibly wrong things. It's like me saying, hey, well, you're just as bad as Hovind because you're a Christian. You're the same as Ken Hovind. He's a convicted felon. He's up for wife abuse. You're just as bad as him. You're all, we should throw Christians out. It's funny how that sort of generalization of lumping everybody in to the worst member of the category doesn't work when it's you. When it's you want to say, but that person isn't, like, I'm a different Christian than them. I have better morals. Yeah. It's almost like we don't generalize into these broad sweeping categories. And I'm not saying that that was a right thing that happened and we shouldn't have stringent immigration policy. I'm saying that we shouldn't consider every single immigrant a murderer and a rapist or not their best people. They're not sending their best people. That's not what we should do. Ugh. Left-handed Jedi, man, for 10 months. We have each other's back. Sir, yes, sir. Absolutely. I'm a humanist. I believe in humans. I want to help humans. I don't care if you're a Christian. I care if you're a Muslim. But you forcing your religion on people will not lead to good outcomes. It will not. And Left-handed Jedi, gift 5 readerships. Thank you so much. Who were the lucky? If Time wasn't one of them, I'm gonna arc up. Cuddly Unicorn, Siddharth Nair, Kent Speak, Hats. KG Smith and Cosmic Kyle, thank you so much, Left-handed Jedi. And that does remind me, I should have some more of these things. Membership grifting? Yeah, okay. Bam! Thank you so much for reminding me, Left-handed Jedi. I really appreciate it. I forget stuff like this. I really do. Oh, I hit Apostate Sisters. What the Beck? Fern Love Bond. IC Spin. Citizen 9. Congratulations. I hope everybody enjoys their emotes and their benefits. Bam. Yes, I was talking about that. And the lies that were coming through are incredible. And the papers that were being presented, one of them was an article from a Christian website, because, he went to Google for his information, of course. And the other ones, like, for instance, there was one from the Mayo Clinic, actually disagreed with him. So I know he wouldn't actually share the papers in the chat, but it's just insane, all of the people in the chat going, oh, you absolutely owned Mark Reed. And it's like, yeah, you've got a mute button and you left me on mute for like 5 minutes. Like, I don't know what to do about that. Oh, you're talking to BBM? Yeah. It was a total fail on his account. Absolute fail. None of the citations that he provided were in any way indicative that there were massive problems. Like, he sort of said, hey, this person claimed that, hey, there was like a greater chance of suicide for people that get gender affirming care. No, there wasn't. And none of the papers he had even pointed to that. A lot of them disagreed and said it actually prevented that kind of thing, which is crazy. Like, I just don't know how do they read these things? Do they actually read them? I have no idea. It's nuts.
You should be a mom living her life and thriving right now, but instead she was murdered. And that is the thing with every single crime.
And that is wrong. But the problem is that when you lump everybody into the same category, you will hurt people that are innocent of committing these crimes. Like, at the moment, you're talking about locking up every single person who's even their parents came in illegally. I get that we want to stop this stuff from happening, but, not everybody is doing that. Just like not everybody is being the worst Christian out there.
And every rape, every assault, every murder by an illegal immigrant is that it's a preventable crime. No, not all illegal immigrants are going to commit additional crimes, but they're all preventable crimes. And so on both sides of the issue, we have people that demand our empathy. But the question is, in every chapter, not just who gets our empathy, because on every side of every issue, there's someone who gets our empathy,
Sure.
but what is true? And in the Bible, we see very clearly that everywhere a wall is mentioned when it comes to a city, it is literally or metaphorically a symbol of protection and provision and security and stability. A man without self-control is likened to a city without walls. That means you are very vulnerable to attack. And actually, when we look at
but we're talking about Iron Age times. Like, we can't basically say, hey, walls will still do the same thing. No, they're not. Like, come on now. Yes, they do say that. Michael.
Beginning, God
Absolutely.
places man in a garden, not in a jungle, but a garden with parameters that is meant to be worked and to be kept and to be cultivated. We see that heaven itself has walls. Walls are symbols of security. God placed us in a country, God placed us in a nation with a government. Those are his ideas.
Yeah, it also gives you instructions on what the priest should wear, and that you shouldn't boil a mare in its mother's milk, or you shouldn't wear mixed threads and stuff. Are we really going back to Iron Age books for how we run our societies and what we do in our societies? It also says, mind you, and I'll be very, very specific about it. It also says that if you have a young man who is drunk and doesn't listen to you, that you should go and stone him in front of the temple, stone him to death. Are we really going to an Iron Age book to look for our moral guidings? You know, I get that in the Iron Age time, when people had swords and spears and chariots, that walls were a real good idea from, you know, people like the Israelites rocking up on you and destroying your entire civilization. I get that. We don't live in those times. A wall isn't going to stop many people. It'll stop some, sure. But most, as I said, most immigrants, illegal immigrants, they just outstay their visas, or they come in through legal ports of entry. That's essentially it.
Laws were his ideas. And so all of these things are for the safety, security, and the flourishing of human beings. And I go so far as to say you can either support the unmitigated and unvetted infiltration of illegal immigrants, or you can care for your neighbor, but you cannot do both. So that's that actually that
So you can stop immigration, or you can care for your neighbor, or you can let immigration happen or care for your neighbor, but not both. Aren't immigrants your neighbor? What stops them from being your neighbor? Isn't Mexico your neighbor? It's very weird. Her sort of idea of, you know, blessed are the meek and humble, and blessed are the poor, is like, yeah, but they mean the poor Christians.
chapter, I was so passionate as I was writing it because I also did not realize the huge human cost, both to the migrants themselves and to the citizens of this country, of illegal immigration.
Why do you
The cost? What about the, like, look, I'm not saying that illegal immigration is right. I'm certainly not saying that's right. But there is a workforce that does sort of very, very low level jobs that is made up of a lot of illegal immigrants. I would like to see a cost to benefit ratio of having all of those people work those jobs, kind of thing. Just saying, like, as far as I know, and I mean, I haven't gone really in depth, but as far as I know, that there's actually economic benefits to people. And it's really funny because for some reason they don't have a problem, you know, hiring illegal immigrants to do all of their cleaning and all of their work. Maybe she's opposed to it. Okay.
think it is that in other countries it's like okay?
And what gets me is she has probably eaten food that's been picked by illegal immigrants. That's the thing.
To have security and that sort of
Right.
thing, but yet when America does it, it's off the table.
Yeah, I think it is.
No, it's not off the table. Look, you have immigration policy, so do other countries. Nobody's saying that you can't have immigration policy. Nobody's saying that. But we're worried that sort of, you know, you're going to go round and mass deport anybody that's even a different skin color. That's our problem. I don't think that, you know, Trump's mass deportation, he hasn't given how he's going to do this, right? Is he going to have like Gestapo-like vans going around and busting through doors if they even suspect somebody's of a different nation? And we're talking about the guy that said that Obama was an illegal immigrant, or basically Obama wasn't born in America. When he was born in Hawaii, like, he was definitely an American. Like, we're worried about the implementation of this, what it entails. That's what we're worried about. It's not that you have an immigration policy. Have an immigration policy. I get it. And there's other issues, like, for instance, the Dreamers. which are people whose parents moved here illegally, and through no fault of their own, they just happen to be born in the country. They've never been to the other country. They don't know what it's like. They know nobody there, and the other country doesn't even recognize them as a citizen. The whole problem is, and it is complicated, the whole problem is that the dreamers literally have nowhere else to go because they're not a citizen of the other country. They would have to prove that their parents were originally born there in order to get citizenship. It's a complicated thing. And our worry is that Trump will just throw out people that have no country to go to and just eject them into Mexico to die. That's the problem. And people that have been born in America, people who are poor that can't prove that they were born in America, you have homeless people out there, produce your birth certificate. And they don't know where it is and have never laid hands on it, for 20 years. Like, it can be difficult. And that's what we're worried about.
This acceptance of this, I know that people thought this was overused in 2020, even though it's a true academic term and it's an accurate description of what a lot of people believe, but it's this critical race theory idea that white oppressor, black and brown people oppressed, and therefore
okay, that isn't all to critical race theory. There's so much more to it than that. But you have to understand that in the recent history, and I'm not talking recent history as in the last 10 years or so, I'm talking over the last 100 years or so, that generally around the world, white people were the oppressors and, people of not white skin were the oppressed. I'm really sorry to burst your pretty little bubble there, but that is the truth. Like, do you understand what antebellum slavery was? Do you understand at all? Okay, that's the recent history. Now we have to understand that there is systemic racism out there. It's kind of like, I flagged down a taxi being a white guy. A black guy with the same job, wearing the same thing, might not get that taxi to stop. That at a base level is just what we're talking about. It's not my fault. It's not really his fault. It's not really anybody's fault. We just have to be aware of it and fight back against that stereotype. Oh boy. And sort of, George Floyd proved that, hey, if that was a white person, I don't think that would have happened. I don't think so.
In all cases, whenever white people try to enforce laws or what they would say assert dominance or even
assert dominance, there's no problem with enforcing laws. Or, I don't think you should be asserting dominance. Like, why are you asserting dominance over black? Why are you asserting dominance over anybody? Why are we asserting dominance? What are you doing? Peeing on people to assert your dominance? What is happening? She's sort of saying the quiet part out loud here. Like, oh, we're just asserting dominance. Oh, that's all? That's all? Asserting dominance over other people?
Then enforce their borders. This is an act of oppression. This is an act of supremacy.
No, nobody's saying enforcing your borders is an act of suppression or oppression or anything like it. Nobody is saying that. That's the thing. This is I love the pause. This is the Christian persecution complex. Again, because you think that Christians are the most persecuted people. Like, you have such a bad life that someone calls you a nasty piece of work for being mean to poor people. Oof. Like, seriously, you're allowed to enforce your border policies. No one's stopping you. The problem with the wall isn't that it was mean or nasty or horrible. The problem with the wall is the wall was not economically sound and would not do what you wanted it to do. The problem with the wall wasn't the wall. It was that the problem with the wall was that it was a dumb idea.
supremacy, this is an act of racism. They would say we live on stolen land.
Nobody says it's an act of racism. It's simply having borders. And you do live on stolen land. I'm really sorry, you do.
And this is a colonized land that wasn't ours to begin with. And
it was a colonized land that wasn't yours to begin with. What are you talking about? The colonists came there and took the land away from the indigenous Native American people. That's a fact. That is a fact. And this is the thing. This is the person saying, oh, well, you know, they talk about their feelings, but they don't talk about the facts. That is a fact.
Therefore, we have no right to tell people that they can't come here. But of course, the reality is...
No, nobody's saying that. I don't know anybody that's saying, hey, because this land was taken away from the Native Americans, you can't enforce any kind of policy on your borders. Maybe some are, but I think that's a really horrendous idea as well. I think that, you know, you have to have immigration policy. I get that. It's just, that's not a reason why the wall is a dumb idea. The wall's a dumb idea because it's so costly, so ineffective. It's just a dumb idea. And the fact that that America was colonized and taken away from the Native American people doesn't invalidate a border policy.
And this is true in every conversation that is driven by critical race theory, is that the entire history of the world is oppressed versus oppressors, and every people group of every different ethnicity and skin color has been on the side of the enslaved or the enslaver, the oppressed or the oppressor. If you go back far enough, I mean, every land virtually has been conquered. And so that's really not how we can judge whether something is right or wrong.
I don't know her point. Yeah, every land's probably been conquered at some point. Yeah, we're trying to stop that. Are you basically saying we should conquer other lands and might makes right?
Or unjust. We have to look at the facts that we have now, be as impartial as possible, look to the principles of scripture. And
yeah, I agree with everything except the scripture part. Why should we look for scripture? Look, it is contentious, right? We have this situation where people have come through in the past, conquered a land, thrown out the occupants, put them in reservations, horrible stuff. Now, people live there now, and we can't change it back to the way it was. We can't just change to the past where the land is owned by the Native American people, because basically the government doesn't own a ton of the land. It's mostly owned by, you know, just people, just ordinary people. So it's kind of a situation where we can't go back. And what we're sort of saying is we make reparations, give allowances for the Native Americans that are there, and try to heal the divide that colonialism has caused between us. And there's a way forward with that, and there's a way back. The way forward is at least acknowledging what happened, acknowledging their cares and their concerns and what happened to their people, trying to make some effort to make amends for the wrongs of the past. The other way is basically going, well, screw you, people have always been conquered, we got ours. And one of those ways is going to cause problems and one isn't. And what's hilarious is they're sitting there going, oh, we aren't the people causing chaos and problems. Whereas it is the left side trying to actually make amends and heal rifts and come together and stop this endless cycle of violence that humanity seems to be bloody in love with. And the scripture doesn't help with that. Yeah, as top tested, he knows. They know. You know, it sort of says, hey, this land was promised to you. That's what the Old Testament says. God promised you all of this land. Go and get it. By the edge of a sword, go and get it.
And vote for, support the policies that best support order.
Yeah. And I'd love for you to...
Correct. And I'm not saying... So this, Carlos, is called whataboutism. Okay, so it's whataboutism. Well, what about the Native Americans? What about what they did? What about all these instances? the actual fallacy in formal logic is called a tu quoque. It means and you also. So if I say, hey, it's wrong what the colonists did, killing people and taking their land, you're going, well, what about the Native Americans? Yeah, that was wrong too. But as I said, we can't rewind time to make everything how it was. We've got to deal with the way the situation is now, right? But it is a fallacy to sort of say, well, they did it as well. We're not saying that's right either. But all it is a diversion to say, hey, I don't want to talk about this other subject, so I'm going to say these other people did so as well. Okay, I'm going to justify what they did with what somebody else did. And just because somebody else did the same thing doesn't make what the original person did right. It would be like, you know, sort of somebody murdering someone. And I say, hey, they murdered that person. And you going, well, what about Dharma? He murdered a whole ton of people. He did it. Well, what about drone strikes by the president? Well, what about Israel, you know, sort of hammering Palestine? Well, what about all of these other instances where it's been done? What about them? You're just trying to distract from the idea that somebody's done something wrong. It's not an argument. It's a logical fallacy. What somebody else does that's wrong, even if that person did the same thing, doesn't justify anything that you're doing. They're both wrong. Right?
Speak to somebody who might be watching us or listening to us thinking, gosh, I mean, I agree with you in principle. You know, in my heart, that's kind of what I think. But I just want to stay out of politics. I want to stay out of trying to bring my ethics into somebody else's life, which is really like I've been learning a lot about the history of pietism in the US. That really that was a group of Christians that decided that politics and government was this other unspiritual thing. Like we're spiritual. And that really has almost like this created this divide where it's like part of you is spiritual and part of you is everything else, which is what you're really talking about with that compartmentalization. But what would you say to a Christian who might be just kind of uncomfortable with the way that we're talking about politics and all of these topics?
I totally understand where this person is coming from. I think I've had a lot of those people in.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot more acceptable to the rest of society who may not share in your religion. If you're sort of saying, hey, I have my beliefs on this, they're my own beliefs, I'm not going to try and sort of foist those beliefs or leverage them onto other people. You know, a lot of society go, okay, well, you're entitled to your beliefs. Don't mind it at all. As long as you're not taking away my rights, I'm fine with that. They're a lot more accepting of those kind of Christians that will say, hey, I don't believe in this. I disagree with the law, but I'm not going to do things to take away people's rights, to marginalize people, to other people, to denigrate them within society or vilify them in society in order to have my religious convictions enshrined in some sort of special place in society. We deal, atheists, other religions deal with those Christians a lot better. It's more about social cohesion than it is about sort of, you know, having any one religion correct or you know, sort of making things a certain way.
My audience, a friend typically sends them an episode, they start listening, and I think at first they are a little bit uncomfortable, but for that group I created an alliteration many years ago that I repeat all the time, and it's politics matter because policy matters because people matter. Politics affects policy, policy affects people, and people matter. This is not some abstract issue, but the representatives that we have in office and the laws that are put in place have a real effect on people, on their ability to live, on their livelihood. And now we are seeing that in a very fundamental theological way when we see, for example, that California passed a law that says if parents don't affirm a child's so-called gender identity, that child can be taken out of their custody. I've actually seen the effects of that in talking to some of those parents in states across the country.
Yeah, and I did the one on this the other day. It was sort of the because of the Christian beliefs, they basically were saying that they would require a trans child to be chaste. So they were denied adoption on the best, because they basically said that when asked if they would treat a trans child any differently, they would say yes, they would require that trans child to be chaste. So essentially they were being bigoted towards that child. So based upon that and another couple of things, they were refused adoption. It wasn't actually taken off their hand.
We are looking at the Harris-Biden administration imprisoning pro-lifers. Bevelyn Williams, Joan Bell, is a 74-year-old grandmother who stood in front of the entrance of an abortion clinic, and she is serving 3 years in federal prison.
Yep, and rightfully so. Now, if you're unfamiliar with this, it's not that she stood in front of, number one, give me one sec. So I will go to the government website. So this is Joan Bell, right, 74 of Montague. They engaged in a conspiracy to create a blockade at the health clinic. She didn't just stand in front of it. They actually created a blockade, right? She met with them to participate in a clinic blockade. They forcefully entered the clinic and blockaded 2 clinic doors using their bodies, furniture, chains, and ropes. Okay, so they want to put it as, well, they stood in front of the doors. That's all they did. It's a lie. It's just another outright lie from these people. Oh, I don't have that zoomed in. Hold on. Okay, so according to the evidence presented at trial, Marshall and Bell were on the group that forcefully entered the clinic and blockaded 2 clinic doors using their bodies, furniture, chains, and ropes. Right, so the idea that they just stood in front of the doors is an absolute unmitigated lie. Now, the FACE Act is basically, it's a act that I believe Clinton put forward, that it's like you're not allowed to blockade clinics based upon any reason, kind of thing, because they were getting a lot of these. And don't forget, during the 80s, there were bombings of abortion clinics. Yes, they were bombed by, good, kind-hearted Christians were blowing up buildings. Nice, eh? Nice. Christian terrorists, don't forget that. They had a maximum penalty of 11 years in prison, right? They got off with 3. They actually did pretty well. But not only did that, they also threatened the staff as well. Right, so they not only conspired to do this, they planned it. They basically blockaded the doors, and they took chains and ropes and used the furniture from the clinic. So it's a lie. It's a lie.
Right now, the people that we elect have a real effect on people. They have a real effect on vulnerable people, specifically on children. When you have an administration whose Health and Human Services Department is sending out recommended guidelines for so-called trans children that includes chemical castration, we're talking puberty blockers in 10-year-old boys, or even double mastectomies for young girls. That is happening in hospitals. It's documented.
When you're saying young girls, I don't think it's like the children that you're trying to portray them as being. This is something that I just encountered on another channel, that they were saying, hey, they were doing chemical castration. And it was a total lie. They weren't. They were doing hormone replacement therapy, and they were doing puberty blockers. And they will just call it chemical castration. Just because the drug's the same drug doesn't mean you're getting the same treatment. It's absolutely ridiculous. And the courts will find that they didn't get surgery as the one person claimed. They didn't get these things happening, and they will keep up the lie. They will just lie and lie and lie. And it's absolutely ridiculous. Like how somebody can read a study and still say it agrees with them and just lie. It's beyond me. I don't know how to address that. Like these are things that have gone around and around so much in the Christian sort of echo chamber that they see the proof in front of them that it's not, and they have to say, hey, no, that's made up, or that's I know that's a government document from the law courts, but it's made up, it's not real. Like, I don't know how they can do that.
Across the country, that matters. That's a
Do you have that? Do you have a link to that or something, Ember? The state could take custody of an LGBT child if the parents don't force them into conversion therapy. What the hell? I was unaware of this. I was absolutely unaware of this. There's one from the Trevor Project. This says it's protecting from. Are you sure you didn't? Are you sure you didn't mean if the parents force them into conversion therapy? The federal judges apparently in 2024, when's that, June, they threw out a law blocking treatment for transgender children. I'm not sort of saying that DeSantis isn't absolutely trying it, but I'm not seeing that, to be honest with you. Well, if you can, Amber, I'd love to be sent it. Hang on, I'll get my Discord up and see if you're, maybe you're responding on that one. Okay. Give me one sec. When was this? (2023) May. Yeah, no, that's been struck down by the federal government. Hang on, I'll put the link to it there. Yeah, it's been struck down. A federal judge threw it out. But that's okay. Yeah, do feel free to send it to me if you do have anything else. I am interested, but I don't think that's the one, mate. Yeah. Still looking. I'm not seeing it, but yeah, I mean, nothing about what Florida's doing would surprise me. Ever since that book ban, nothing Florida is doing would surprise me anymore. Like, it just is incredible.
Affecting real people, that's affecting their bodies. I know of a young woman named Daisy Strong, and she's a Christian now, and she has children, and she's a beautiful young woman, but she was allowed to transition, so-called, as a teenager, got a double mastectomy, and she has 2 kids now, but she still struggles so much because
Yeah, that's what we call anecdotal evidence. It's like saying, well, I took this medication and I had a horrible time. It caused me to have diarrhea and all of this kind of other stuff. Yeah. Yeah, if you just go by what one person says, but we don't prescribe medical treatments on how one person experiences that treatment. There's a reason why we try to do incredibly comprehensive studies over multiple people. We don't just go, well, you had a bad experience of it. Oh, it doesn't work. Toss it out. Oh, that person had an allergic reaction to penicillin. Let's just destroy all the penicillin. Yeah, what did penicillin do that's good for anybody at all? You know, like, you can't just look at one person's anecdote. There's been people that have regretted having breast implants. You know, like, they've said, hey, this breast implant ruptured. We still allow them to. And I think that sort of, you know, I would agree that, hey, you should probably wait until you're an adult to choose whether you have surgery. But I don't see the problem with prescribing gender-affirming care if it is puberty blockers or hormone treatment. I don't see the problem with that. I see a problem with just the person going, hey, I want it. I certainly think that they should have parents involved, and they should absolutely have their medical care specialist involved. We're not just talking about people doing it willy-nilly.
Because she can't breastfeed her babies. If there had been some kind of law, like, a law can be such a grace from God that protected her, that said, no, doctors, you're not allowed to do that, she would be whole and healed, because she's realized since then that she's really a woman. When I hear that awful story of Amber Thurman, the woman in Georgia who had to drive to North Carolina to get abortion pills, who was pregnant with twins, who ended up dying herself because of complications from the abortion pill. If there had been a law banning the abortion pill, all three of those image bearers would be alive.
No. This is absolutely well-known lie by the made up by the right. I did do some research on this. Where was it? So, Associated Press, probably about the most neutral press platform you can find. The two George deaths died to abortion restrictions. They say the abortion pills they took are safe. Amber Thurman died 20 hours for a hospital to treat complications that occurred after she took abortion pills. So what actually happened, right? There's rare occasions when mifepristone can cause excessive bleeding that requires emergency care. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. Mifepristone. I'm not sure how you pronounce that one. The FDA has actually incredibly regulated that. The problem was that they couldn't get an abortion, right? They absolutely couldn't get an abortion, so they took these abortion pills. But it wasn't caused by the pills; it was caused by problems, right? A tiny fraction of patients suffer major or serious effects. So this is what we talk about when we talk about sort of the prescribing of any drugs or any kind of medical treatment. There's always risk, right? So they went to the medical room. They had to wait 20 hours. It was to do with the pregnancy. It wasn't to do with the pregnancy drug. I did see in here somewhere where they said why it was. Oh, I did have an article where it says that it was, but it certainly wasn't the pills that caused it. This case is the first instance of a woman dying delayed care to state abortion law. Yeah. So it's also a woman with lupus, diabetes, and hypertension pills. An autopsy found fetal tissue hadn't been expelled, and a lethal combination of painkillers. It wasn't actually the abortion pills; it was the painkillers, right? Because she wasn't in a hospital getting an abortion. She had the pills. It caused pain. She took painkillers, and the painkillers actually interacted with lupus, diabetes, and hypertension, and she died. Mifepristone? Okay, mifepristone. Thank you very much. I read stuff and I don't know how to pronounce it. I should have looked it up when I found it. But this is sort of a case where they're saying, oh, it was the pill. No, it wasn't. We know it wasn't, right? We know it was the fact that they had other stuff, and it was the pregnancy that killed them, right? It was the pregnancy that killed them, right? So you may say, oh, and I'll just see what they say about this. The government was God's idea. So the question is, how safe are these pregnancy pills, right? How safe are they, and should we be taking them? Because people, like, I'm not going to lie, people have died from taking the pregnancy pills before. Okay, the question is it safe, right? And like any medicine, anything at all, it depends, and it's relative, right? It's complicated, right? So is it safe? Well, I just want to show you this graphic, right? This is the drug, mifepristone. 5 deaths per million users, okay? Penicillin has 20 deaths per million users. And Viagra has 49 deaths per million users. Okay? Viagra. So the question is, why aren't they sitting there, and if it's not religion and their religious beliefs, why are they not making such a song and dance about Viagra? They don't care. They do not care about Viagra, right? But let's compare it to childbirth. Right. So it's got a much lower risk of actually carrying the child. That's the problem. They want to say, oh, well, this person here had a bad experience, this person here had a bad experience. Sure. But it's not like carrying the child, because a lot more people get a lot worse complications carrying the child. That's what we're saying. So yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, there's nothing that is 100% safe, but 5 deaths per million users is kind of about as close as you can get with any medical process. Like there's no way this is more dangerous than penicillin or Viagra. There's no way. But why aren't they protesting Viagra? It's because they don't actually care about the people. They don't care about the woman. They don't care about her. And I don't know why they're pretending they do.
If there had been a law banning the abortion pill, all 3 of those image bearers would be alive. And so God came up with laws. They were his idea. The government.
Yeah, no, laws were not God's idea.
That was his idea. And if our worldview is not going to influence laws, someone else's will.
It was spun to almost persuade everyone that it was the pro-life laws that killed her, when in reality, it was the abortion pill that is not safe. It's killing all sorts of.
Yeah, no, it is safe. It's safer than Viagra. I don't know what to tell you. And the article I showed, yes, it didn't. It said what the cause of death was. It was painkillers mixed with lupus, diabetes. It was comorbidities. None of those comorbidities were the abortion pill. None of them.
Of people, it's killing the baby, of course, but it's also causing extreme health problems for the moms. And we've done a couple of shows on that. Makes me sick to my stomach. There are 2 issues that have really caused me to become more vocal about this stuff, and that is the abortion issue, which I've always been really passionate about, but also more recently, just all of the trans laws that are allowing people to mutilate our children when they are not at an age where they can give consent, and we're seeing the backlash of that with a lot of the.
Yeah, I mean, kids can't get give consent for a lot of things. There's certain things that the parents have to decide what they consent to and what they don't. Like if there's a medical operation, we don't just let the child decide whether it wants to, get radiation therapy if they happen to have, leukemia or something. We don't give them that responsibility yet, for good reason, because the child might go, well, I don't want to do that. That's horrible and painful. And it's awful. Good question is why your God gave the kid leukemia in the first place. But we don't give the child that responsibility because they're not old enough, and not their cognitive abilities have not developed enough to make an informed choice. So we leave it up to the parents. Oh, that's a really good point, Andrew. Oh, yeah, Andrew. What is circumcision then? Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine because God said it was okay, Andrew. Stop. God gave consent for that one. He loves the foreskin.
Transition stories, and it occurs to me, like, if we stay silent, we actually have an opportunity to have a voice and opinion as far as how these things go.
Nobody is stopping these people from having a voice and an opinion, but I will have a voice and opinion on your like really horrible voice and opinion. Like, you can't just go, well, we want to speak and have everybody listen to our sermons. No, that's not how this works. You say something, I say something. You sound dumb, I don't. That's how this works, because I'm not basing it upon what my imaginary friend says. I'm basing it on what is actually demonstrably good or bad for people. And in order to do that, I'm using reliable methodology like science and papers and experts and people that know what they're talking about. Not me. It's them you should listen to. But you don't, because you'd rather listen to your pastor, even though your pastor's only qualification for abortion is probably, you know, rails against it.
And if we let that go, if we
Yeah,
advocate that,
100%.
then I mean, the progressives who want to do that will be glad for us to be silent so that they can bring
Yeah.
their policy.
Well, the distinction of the church from your run-of-the-mill charity is our convictions. That's what makes the church the church, is our belief in Christ. Yes, compassion is good, but compassion, just like any other strong emotion, must be in submission to our convictions. The Christian conviction that Jesus Christ is Lord and that he reigns and that his ways are better. And whenever we have a feeling, or whenever we have a value that is not in submission to Christ, well, then of course we become our own gods. And that is even true of something like empathy. That's really the point of my book, that when empathy is your guide, rather than submitting your empathy to the truth of God's word, then you end.
Yeah, so this is sort of how, and sort of, so I outline this in how they're trying to get the moderate Christians to agree to their lunacy, and that is this: it is, you have to make your empathy and your understanding of other people subservient to what the Bible says and what the interpretation of the Bible is. It's kind of this. So essentially, what they're saying is they're saying to the moderates, do what the Bible says and don't care who you hurt. That's essentially what I hear. Do what the Bible says, don't care about who you hurt. And that's unacceptable, because not everybody believes in the Bible or even your interpretation of the Bible. If you are hurting people, you don't get to do that. It doesn't matter how true you think it is. It doesn't matter how, factual you think that your fairy tale book is. It doesn't matter. If you're hurting people, you're hurting people. That's all. And we can discuss what's best for people. But when you are going to your Bible, I don't care. I don't care what an Iron Age book says. I don't care.
End up making very silly and actually deleterious decisions because you are so driven by your emotions toward a person.
Well, that's not the problem. We're not really driven by our emotions. Our empathy is there to understand what other people is feeling, but that's not what we create policy on. We create it on objective, or as close to objective as possible, scientific research and actually looking into these things. We don't just go, well, that's my emotion. It's incredible how much she goes, oh, you're basing everything on emotion, and then talks about how she feels about stuff so often. We're basing it upon scientific studies that evaluate the harms and the good that all medical things do, not just one pill or stuff like that. We're looking at what objectively does this cause, not what you think your imaginary friend thinks of this. That is not a good criteria for examining how good or bad any medical treatment is.
But I see that equivocation from pastors all the time. And it's funny because they actually feel like they are being bold and they're being courageous when really you're not saying anything.
Yeah.
Everyone is leaving there being like, okay, but how do I think about abortion? Okay, but what does the Bible say about gender?
Yeah.
Okay, but does the Bible have anything to say about immigration? I'm not saying that every pastor has to talk about every single
Sure.
issue on the ballot, but these big issues, Pastor, why can't you be the one to offer clarity? Why do they have to go to me or Elisa?
Yeah.
Why do they have to go to?
They don't, and they probably shouldn't. They probably shouldn't, because that pastor probably realizes that when he starts supporting things that start to do real harm in our society, his church isn't going to be around for long, because people will not accept a church that promotes these things and causes incredible harm. Well, at least I used to think that. I think after this election, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people will embrace the nightmare and go to these horrible policies that harm people because their God says so.
Instagram or TikTok, because they could be going to people that completely lead them astray. Don't you want to be the one to shepherd them in that?
So the different types of lies that you're dealing with is abortion is healthcare, trans women are women, love is love, no human is illegal, and social justice is justice.
Yeah, that's all. That's not lies. That's all true. So abortion is healthcare. It's literally medical, approved by the American Medical Association. It is like, what do you think healthcare is? It's like saying, oh, amputation is healthcare. It's not. It's chopping off someone's arm. Yeah, it's healthcare. Like, you don't understand what healthcare is. Healthcare isn't just, hey, we're going to preserve everything as it is. Do you know chemotherapy is actually poison? Like, it is literally poisoning your body. It is also healthcare. We don't base the efficacy and whether something is healthcare on what it is doing. We base it on outcomes. We base it on how it comes out, whether it will be in that person's best interest for it to happen. So this whole thing of, well, abortion isn't healthcare, you're wrong. You're just 100% wrong. It absolutely is. It's like saying, well, amputation isn't healthcare. It 100% is. Yes, it is. We want to make sure that it's medically necessary and as safe as possible, because that's what medicine aims to do. But it is 100% healthcare. Now, love is love. Yeah, that's basically saying that, hey, you have no right, when a man loves another man, you have no right to say, hey, that's not love. He loves the other guy. That's love. That is love. That love is love. We all experience love. Who are you to say that is not love? Who are you? Yeah, these girls, man, there's something wrong here.
And you go really deep into all of these topics. I'd love to talk about number 3, which is love is love. I think that was a really confusing one when those signs started popping up on everyone's lawn. And
yeah, so it's the response of people that love each other and care for one another and have a deep and meaningful love for somebody of the same sex, and Christians would turn around and say that's not love. It's an answer to them saying that's not love, and they say, well, love is love. I feel love, and that is love. Now that you cannot say that they do not feel love. You can't say that. You're not them. You're not them. They just want to tell people that they don't feel love. Well, who are you to say that? Like, who are you? You don't have a special place in society where you determine that, hey, people of different genders can love each other, but people of the same gender, no, they can't love each other. No, that's not up to you. You don't decide that.
And people were saying love is love, and you're like, well, yeah, but you can't define something by using the word to describe the word you're trying to define. It's kind of like that What is a Woman documentary of Matt Walsh when
No, it's not trying to do that. And you kind of can use definitions. Self-referential definitions are definitely a thing. I talked about this a while back, actually. Usually when self-referential definitions happen, essentially the usage being used is whatever the society that uses that definition thinks it is, right? So what's a religion? Any religious institute? Well, it's hinged upon religious. It essentially says, well, so in that case, it is referring to whatever the social normative usage of that word is. And there's a lot that comes with that, but they can be self-referential, but that isn't what the purpose of that is. The purpose of love is love is as a critique to Christians saying, well, you don't really love that person. And they're saying, so it's not love, right? Two men having a relationship is not love. And the answer is love is love. If they love each other, then it's love. It is a tautology, but it's more a response to bigots and horrible people like you guys than any kind of definition that you want to get into.
He was saying, exactly. Can you define woman without using the word woman? And the person couldn't do it. So talk about love is love. And what?
Yeah, just because some random person can't define a woman without using the word woman, it doesn't matter. So woman is a gender based upon the exhibition of certain feminine traits that are seen in society as being associated with sort of more female than male. Like I can do it without women. It doesn't mean that nobody can. You guys have no idea what you're talking about. Like, just because one person can't doesn't mean that it can't be done. It's sort of this lowest common denominator where they say, oh, look, I asked this atheist question. He couldn't answer it. Okay. Did you ask a physicist? Because you're asking about the Big Bang. Well, no. It's like, well, what are you talking about? Like, just not everybody can answer every question you give them. I don't get where this.
What does that mean, and how can we think about that as Christians?
Yes, and that's a pattern that I noticed when I was researching this book. Of course, I had heard all of these phrases before, like love is love, social justice is justice, trans women are women, no human is illegal, abortion is.
Yeah, so trans women are women. Woman is just simply a social construct. Like we don't go out there and say, well, it is set in stone and it is an objective thing that women wear dresses, have long hair, wear makeup, all of the things associated with them. We don't do that. That's a social construct. It's a socially constructed thing. We don't, and so applied to any human being, that would be a woman.
Healthcare, but I'm like, wow, they really do that with everything. They come up with these circular mantras and never bother to define their terms, which is the sign of really good propaganda.
Oh, no, they absolutely define their terms. Absolutely. Like gender studies is a thing. They absolutely define everything. You don't know, just because you haven't actually looked up what everything is defined as doesn't mean that it's not defined. They absolutely... Universities and university courses in all of these things are renowned for defining everything they do. In fact, it's one of the first things you learn when writing a scientific paper is define what you're talking about, right? There's certain things that you don't have to, like you're talking about amperage or you're talking about voltage or you're talking about resistance, in ohms or whatever. You probably don't have to define them, but any other sort of external terms that you're using, you will absolutely have to define in the paper. Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. This is just pure ignorance. They absolutely define their terms.
Propaganda, really good propaganda sounds so good, yet is so nonsensical that your brain can't even think about how to refute it.
You mean like God is love? Have you defined God lately? Do we have a definition for God at all? No? Okay.
Love is love sounds so airtight that a lot of people are like, well, I don't know what to say to that. I guess that's true. That does look like love. But when you start to ask yourself a simple question, what do you mean by, which is just a great tactic in any conversation, especially with someone using euphemisms, what do you mean by healthcare? What do you mean by love? Love can't be love because, like, what? Predation is love? Love.
No, who said predation was love? No. Is she trying to insinuate that all gay people are predators? No. What are you talking about? We're talking about two adults in a relationship that care deeply, sincerely, and overwhelmingly for others. We're not talking about, like, what the hell? I don't get this argument.
Lust is love. Stalking is love.
What? Nobody is saying that. Nobody is saying that. Nobody's saying stalking is love. But you do realize that, gay people just aren't stalking one another, that they are actually in relationships. They are actually sharing feelings, having sex, bonding, sharing their intimate desires and their they're connecting on a fundamental level, which is love. They're not stalking one another. Ugh.
Let's define our terms here. And as Christians, we know that God is love, 1 John 4:8. Therefore, he gets to define it. And he does so clearly. He tells us what love is in 1
God is love, so he gets to define it. Wow.
Corinthians 13. And one of the many qualities of love we read in verse 6, which is love never rejoices in wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. So that means we cannot love someone and lie to them. That means we cannot allow our empathy to affirm lies or to lead in a direction that is harmful for the person.
So I suppose that if your husband loves you, he should tell you you look fat in those pants. Just saying. Just saying.
God defines harmful. Love has to mean seeking what is best for a person as God defines best, and seeking what is true for a person as God defines.
Yes, but people don't believe in your made up nonsense. We don't believe in your God, but you're trying to project that onto other people and say, no, that's not love because of my imaginary friend who gets to define what it is. Now, I'm going to take away your rights based upon what I think the master of the universe said. No, you don't get to do that. No. You do realize there's other people in society apart from you. Oh, that's the problem. You thought that you were the only person in society. I'm not saying you can't believe that. What I'm saying is that you can't take people's rights away from them because of that belief. You know, I believe that Christians are actually dangerous and bad for society, but I'm not allowed to take away your rights because of what I believe. That's the important part. And as for this, oh, well, we don't have a voice, she says, as she's participating in a podcast saying all of this nonsense. You're allowed to do that. And I'm allowed to sit here and say, hey, you're a bit fashy because you want to take away people's rights because you think you're in contact with the all-knowing master of the universe.
Truth. So that is a very different thing than empathy. Empathy really isn't a virtue in and of itself. It can lead.
Oh, no, empathy is not a virtue. No, not a virtue. Even though Jesus said, you know, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. No, that's not, you know, that's just empathy. Empathy is not a virtue. Empathy is instrumental in pro-social behaviors, i.e. behaviors that make society cohesive. And I think that Christians, out of all of the people, really, and not all Christians, just these particular breed of them, they show why it is so hard to have a socially cohesive society, because they will just say, hey, I don't care how this makes you feel or suffer or how much it thinks. I have myself, I'm a special person in society that's been chosen by some higher being, and I get to do all of this stuff because I am chosen. Cool story, bro. No.
Lead you to the virtue of love and compassion and selflessness, or it can lead you to being so blinded by your feelings that you forget about everything else and everyone else on the other side of the moral equation. And that is certainly true when it comes to the issue of the definition of marriage. I talk about Glennon Doyle. You and your audience are very familiar because you've written so well about her and just her ideology. But I tell her story in a hopefully compelling way so that at the end of it, after they read about her divorce and then finding Abby Wambach and falling in love and getting so-called married to her and feeling so liberated and free and happy and one big joyous family, that they would feel like, okay, maybe that's fine. I mean, how does that hurt me? How does that harm me? And so, of course, in the chapter, we talk about the biblical reality of marriage, which we.
Yeah, how does that hurt you? You asked the question, but you never gave the answer. You said, okay, how does that harm me? How does it harm me? What's it got to get? Two women fall in love, they get married. How does that harm me? That's a good question. Are you going to give an answer? Is what's on my mind? Are you actually going to answer, or are you just going to talk about how God gave you the power to make society better?
We can get into, but we also talk about what I found a little bit harder to kind of parse out, but just the practical implications and the political consequences of redefining a natural institution of
Marriage is not a natural institution. We made it up. It's not a natural institution. I don't know where this woman gets her information from, but she thinks that somehow there's nothing constructed about the institution of marriage, which it isn't true. And she hasn't said how it affects her at all. Like she just said, oh, how does that affect me? And moving right on. Fern Lovebond for $2. Thank you so much, Fern. If I leave, suddenly it's for my blood pressure. No, I gotcha. I really do. Look. Or give, like, come on. Let's give Fern some. They need some love. They absolutely need some love. Fern, I get you. I hear you. Yeah, I totally understand. I'm with you. I really am. Give Fern some love if you're out there, because I can understand why. Like, seriously, try using that empathy, people. I get where Fern's coming from. I really do. And that's because I've got some empathy. I really do. Woof.
a natural institution of marriage and what that means for children, how reproductive technology has played a role in creating motherless and fatherless children.
Reproductive technology has played a role in creating. So now she's also against IVF as well. Oof.
The effects of fatherlessness, the effects of motherlessness, institutional.
Did you know Christians are more likely to get divorces than non-religious people are? Did you know that? Fun fact.
Sin, which makes it a lot harder for those people to repent themselves. Yeah. And so we can get into any of those directions. But yeah, this is probably a very controversial chapter, even for conservatives, because it's kind of a battle that many conservatives abandoned several years ago.
Yeah, they did. And it seems like with, I remember when this.
Well, in fairness, I'll be fair. So in fairness, a lot of people who are non-religious don't get married in the first place. So, they are breaking up. It's just they're not counted as being divorced. So there is a bit of lurking variables there. But even if you factor that in, particularly evangelicals are way up there in divorce rates. It's not because they get married so young. Generally, evangelicals will get divorced at an alarming rate. But and again, there's lurking variables there, because people with no religion will generally not get married until they're sure they can make it work, or they found the right person, or they will stay with someone for a while, not get married. They'll spend a few years with somebody, not get married, and then go, well, it's not working out, let's just separate. And that doesn't get factored into the divorce rate. So there is lurking variables, but even if you factor that in, they're still breaking apart at higher rates. So yeah.
This was the talk, everybody was like, is this going to happen? Is this going to be, are we going to change the definition of marriage? And even Christians were saying, what is it? It's not going to affect your life.
Yeah,
if marriage gets redefined, it's not going to affect your life.
Correct.
Which was a total lie, because I think that we're seeing the fallout of that now, the redefinition.
Really? So it's gay marriage that is causing the breakup of evangelical family. How is that happening exactly? That the divorce rates for straight people are being caused by gays getting married. Can you explain how that works?
Definition of marriage has led to all of this other cultural chaos that we see. When you think about like the three.
Oh no, just brush right over that. Just go straight over that. Like, seriously, how exactly is gay people getting married leading to higher divorce rates among straight people? Exactly. I don't understand, because of cultural chaos. What does that even mean? Are these, I know these are trad wives. Are they sort of saying, hey, we shouldn't allow divorce at all? We shouldn't allow no fault divorce, maybe, is what they're saying. lock women in with the person that they absolutely despise and hate because reasons.
Institutions that God actually instituted: marriage and family, the church, and the government. And
No, God didn't. No, God didn't implement marriage or the government. No, that is not what happened. The people implemented the government. Look, your own constitution, it starts, we the people, not I the God. It starts, we the people. The government was implemented of, by, and for the people. God didn't do that. The ignorance of that. I'm not even from your country, and I know that. That was a Gettysburg Address, right? Of the people, by the people, for the people. You know, of the people, by the people, for the people. No God. I'm not even from your country, and I know more about your government than you do. That's embarrassing.
And it's interesting that Christians are okay with the church being the one of the institutions that God instituted. And we can talk about that. But when it comes to family and marriage, it's like we feel like we just have to step out of that argument. Or when it comes to government, we have to step out and just not be involved in that. And that's really sad. Because
no, you can be involved in it. You just can't take people's rights away. And that's the social contract. We provide people with rights. They agree to obey the government in exchange for the government obeying those rights. So you're basically saying, hey, we want to get into government and take away people's rights is not acceptable, because that breaks the contract. People will start to say, well, why am I following what the government says if the government will not honor my rights? And that is the danger, because there's only one path that leads down, and it's horrible.
Because I think the point you're making is that there are victims of that mentality. Like when we step out and just kind of throw our hands up and say, whatever, it's all crazy, I'm just not going to get involved, then there are going to be victims from us doing that. And I've often thought about this too, and then I'll throw it to you for some comments. But, you know, a lot of people, and I have people in my life who have said things like this, like, you know, if you look at the first century Christians, they weren't super political. They, you know, they weren't really trying to overthrow Rome. They were just doing good works. They were being Christians. They were spreading the gospel. We need to do more of that. And it was actually Os Guinness. I heard him answer this so profoundly, where he said, here's the difference. The difference is that in the first century Roman Empire, it was an oppressive empire. They had no power. They had no vote. Nobody cared what you thought. You didn't have political power to protect people. Whereas today, we do. We have a voice. I was just listening to a podcast from Frank Turek with Bill Federer.
So again, this sort of contradicts with what they said earlier, because they said they didn't have a voice. They were voiceless. They were oppressed. They couldn't say what they wanted to say. And now they're saying they have a voice. So which is it? Do you have a voice or not have a voice? I don't know where that lies. Apparently, they both have and do not have a voice. So depending on whether they want to say, hey, we've got to use our voice, or poor us, they will either have or not have a voice. So it just contradictory all the way through.
About the history of pietism and things in the US, and talking about how with a monarchy, you have a king. But what we have is we are all like, it's the people that rule. So we are actually the king. And what Bill Federer was saying is that if you
we are the king. Yes. Supreme executive power is derived from mandate from the masses. I learned that from Monty Python, but it is 100% true. The only thing that keeps the government in power is a mandate from the people. That is the only thing, and has ever been the only thing throughout history. It's only that is the only thing that keeps a government in power. If the people decide that government should not be there, well, there's one of two ways it can go: into totalitarianism or into open revolt. There is nothing, the government cannot stop. If the people decide the government shouldn't be there, there's almost nothing the government can do about it. So I don't know where the God comes in, because America wasn't made by the God. It wasn't placed there by God. It was placed there by people.
Abdicate your responsibility, you're actually just being a bad king. And so I'll throw it over to you for some commentary on that.
Yes, I mean, we live in this amazing system, which was birthed, starting really, you could say, with the Magna Carta, and was advanced through the Protestant Reformation, and then, of course, the British Empire, and then our revolution here in America. We have this concept of lex rex, that the law is king, and we live in a country that is supposed to be.
No one's king. The people are king, basically. The people. Vox populi, voice of the people. Vox populi.
For the people, by the people, of the people. Our government is supposed to be that. Now, does it work itself out like that practically today? Not as much, but that is the system that the founders envisioned. That's what is supposed to be made manifest today. And we get to exercise our right to uphold the Constitution through our vote. And so we have this amazing privilege. And God didn't place any of us here at this time.
Yeah, well, I mean, yes, uphold the Constitution through your vote. Well, yeah, but it's more the Constitution is there to provide a framework for the rights that the government can't violate of the people, in order to provide the system where the people will obey the government, right? So it gives these rights in order to provide that social contract. So those are the rights it cannot violate. But you're really talking about violating the Establishment Clause, that no government will establish any religion of the state. So you're really looking to destroy one of the fundamental rights, that if I'm a Muslim, I'm not going to have a person saying, hey, these rights Christians get but Muslims don't, or Muslims get and Christians don't, or atheists get and Christians don't. We have a series of rights that are equal for everybody. And one of them is the freedom of religion. You have the right to choose any religion you want or not, and no, the government will not make law with respect to any religion. So, if you're a Christian and you're in a Muslim area that has that, like just say you're a Muslim, you can still participate in government. It's not going to prevent you from doing so.
In this country, arbitrarily and accidentally, we get this great privilege of being able to exercise our vote. There are many Christians around the world today who do not have that privilege. That right is not recognized, but we do. And God didn't place you in one of those countries. He placed you here. And yes, we should share the gospel. Yes, we should be taking care of others. Yes, we should be a light in our community, but none of that is exclusive of our political advocacy. We can know that Jesus is coming back, that he is king, that one day we will have no more elections, we will have no more politics, there will be no more issues. We can live joyfully and victoriously in light of that, and still realize that we occupy this physical temporal space and have been given certain responsibilities. I often think of Jeremiah 29, when Israel's in exile in Babylon. Everyone knows Jeremiah 29:11, but there's another verse in Jeremiah 29 that says, while you are in exile, seek the welfare of the city that I have placed you in. And even though America isn't ancient Israel, obviously.
Yeah, well, that's well and good, but they certainly didn't object to who was it? They certainly didn't object to the Persians coming in and destroying Babylon and letting them go back to the Israelite lands. They certainly didn't object at all. I don't know. It's weird.
Christians are exiles in this world, and it seems like the same principle would apply, that we should be seeking the welfare of the city God has placed us in. There are many ways to do that have nothing to do with politics, but because politics affects people, politics is one way to seek the welfare.
And nobody is stopping you from doing that, as much as you cry up and down. No one's stopping you from doing that. But the consequences of taking people's rights away is on you. You're going to be the one blamed if people suffer because of your actions. Not us. You are going to be the one. And basically saying, well, don't have empathy for those people I'm going to cause to suffer by my actions is not acceptable to people. people will see other people suffer. And as much as you say, oh, well, just don't have empathy for them, you might be capable of that, but most people aren't. Right? It's why seeing children in cages on the border was horrific. And that's why one of the reasons why that big orange idiot was kicked out the first time, as well as seeing people, you know, suffer from a disease and have him fail miserably in his handling of it. That's why people hated him for the way that he handled the hurricanes and the people suffering. It's because we care about one another. So yeah, you can say anything you want, but you're going to be the one to have to say, hey, well, they're suffering and I don't care. And I'm not even sure that they do, because they don't seem to understand what empathy is at all.
Of our neighbor. That's how I'm thinking of it. And that's why I think it matters so much. And you're totally right, too, about the issues that are at stake. We're talking about existential, moral, theological, creation order issues. I heard a pastor say recently, it's not that our theology has become more political, it's that politics have become more theological. And when politics intercepts or interjects itself into the church's realm, the church has to stand up and say, not so fast.
Okay. Well, that sort of calls it for the slightly fashy thing. Let me see if I can fix my camera. It's a little bit blurry. I'm not sure. It must have lost focus for a second. Give me one sec. Come on. Come on. Is that better? Yeah. So all of that is absolutely terrible. The whole point is that when people start to go, well, I don't see why I have to have empathy for these people or that people or the other people. It kind of is this whole idea of vilify a certain segment of people, blame all of the ills of society on them, and then implement a government to punish those people while taking control over every facet of of other people's lives. This was World War II German thing. They basically got bunches of people, made them the enemy and the evil within, and persecuted them on behalf of the rest of society. Now, we don't want to do that. I'm not saying that all Christians are like this, right? This is just these extremist people that don't seem to understand what empathy is. And it is horrifying that they don't understand what the purpose of empathy is. Now, we kind of are looking towards a civilization that has people have these rights. We know what makes healthy people. We know people can be healthy or unhealthy. It's why medicine, we've got these checks to make sure that we're giving people what they need. It is not enough that they basically say, well, I've got a religion, I've got a belief, I'm going to use that belief to take away your rights. We're not allowed to do that. It doesn't matter if I believe that Christianity is bad for stuff. I've got to show that Christianity is actually bad for society. And I will argue that point because I believe it. But I don't get to take Christians' rights away. I don't get to imprison Christians because I think that their religion is bad. I don't get to do that. I don't get to throw people out of the country because I think they're bad for the country. Like that's not what we do. So this whole idea that their belief system somehow has to have this special place because they believe it really hard, I don't care. Show me that these things are actually bad for society. Show me that the people that you are saying are doing the wrong thing are in fact doing the wrong thing. Don't just say that a God says it. And I mentioned this a while back. Some Christians, they're fine. You know, you can ask them, well, does God want the best for humanity? Yes, okay, if God wants the best for humanity, we can start having a conversation over what's the best for humans. Right? We can start having a conversation about what's good for people or bad for people, good for society, bad for society. But if your only decision is, well, God wants it, instead of what's good for people, well, God wants it. It doesn't matter what's good for people. If God wants this thing, then that's what we should do. At that point, I can't talk to you anymore. you're basically saying, well, my imaginary friend says so. What am I supposed to do with that? I can't discuss, like, I can prove to you all day long that this policy or that policy is good for society or good for people. The other person simply doesn't care. They're basically saying that, well, God's going to make it good in some imaginary afterlife or some imaginary, time when the king's going to sit on his, like, how do I even discuss stuff with that person? How do I even address what is good or bad for humanity? Because at that point, that doesn't matter. What matters is what's good or bad for the God, or what you think the God wants. And I just want to plan this. You didn't take part in the poll. Oh, well, okay. So what I meant by the Christians, I meant the Christians in this video, not all Christians. Spiel, Carl. I'm very aware of that. No, I get you. I get you. Absolutely, there's Christians that care about other people. Absolutely. No, I would not deny that. I meant the Christians. I didn't mean all of them. I meant the ones in this video, just for clarification. But I'll end the poll. Thank you for reminding me. And yeah, whoever said all of the above are absolutely right. But yeah, in a nutshell, empathy is bad because it forces me to have feelings of victims. Yeah, absolutely. And that is why when you are doing something like the Germans in World War II did, vilifying the demographic that you want to oppress is necessary, or else people will feel for those victims. That's what all of their propaganda was about. Saying, hey, these people are nasty and horrible and greedy and all of these stereotypes, and doing all of this posters and literature about how they are, because they have to make them incapable. They have to make the people incapable of feeling empathy for them. And that's what I feel like is happening. That's what I feel like is happening with these people. Don't feel empathy for these people. They don't deserve your empathy. Instead, have empathy for the poor Christians. Well, horrible. Bring back the flying spaghetti monster. I'll give it a try. But thank you so much for joining me, everybody. I hope that wasn't too... Left-Handed Jay said it was an intense show. Yeah, I felt strongly about it when I watched it. I'm like, this is how these usual, moderate, caring Christians are dragged into this nonsense. This is how it happens. You ever met a Christian? They're caring, they're nice, they're polite, they really seem to care about people around them, but they'll still do awful things. Yeah, this is how. And it's the fundamentalists saying, hey, between empathy and what God wants, between your own sense of empathy over that poor victim and what God wants, ignore the empathy. Do what God wants. Ignore their pain, ignore their suffering. That's how you end up with situations like this. And I feel in a way that's sort of how the election happened. Sort of ignore the troubles and concerns you're gonna cause people. Just do what God wants. How do you know what God wants? Well, I'll tell you. I'm the interpreter of what God wants. I'll tell you what he wants, which just happens to align with what I want. That's what I see from these people. It just happens to align with what they want. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody. That was awesome. I really enjoyed it. Well, long one. I didn't even notice the time, but thank you again. And I'll be back next week. Now, tomorrow night, Eastern time, tomorrow for me, I am interviewing the wonderful Ember. So drop by, and that should be a really interesting conversation with one of my best friends on the interwebs. Should be fantastic. Then we're over on Ember's channel for Debate Dissection. That's my Sunday, probably your Saturday night if you're in the Eastern States. And then I should be back with new stuff in next week. If you are watching my gaming channel, I'm sort of mixing up my gaming channel. I might be doing that at a different time because I'm finding it very, very difficult to keep my schedule at the moment. And I think it's just the time I do that in my nighttime. So I'm just finding it a little difficult. So I may sort of play with that just a wee bit, just a little bit, so I can do it at a more reasonable time. And actually, I'll drop that link because I feel good. I feel good this Friday. You just lick the like button. And the like button loves it. Oh, you just licked the thumb button. Okay. And the thumb button loves it. Awesome. Okay, that's my gaming channel. Do join the Discord. I'm trying to get that started up as well. Anything else? Do like, subscribe, do all the things. Thank you so much, Fern. Really appreciate it. Do be kind to one another. Have empathy for one another. You don't, when somebody is saying, hey, this happened to me, you can feel bad without actually doing whatever they want. Like you can at least understand from their point of view. Be kind to each other. Be kind to yourself. Have empathy for yourself. And I will catch you in the next one. Thanks, everyone.